Otaku in the Marvel DC Universe. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction, so please don't attempt real magic. The results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 876: Pick and Choose. Soon, with the return of these exploration teams, another major issue was brought to the forefront, that is, the Alien Extraordinary Academy plan was officially approved. After truly verifying the safety and reliability of Liang Yue's planet, the official organizations of various countries also immediately began intensive preparations. Of course, the selection of academy personnel is a major project, especially for China, which will account for 90% of the total number of students. The issue of candidates has actually already begun thanks to the qualification testing equipment provided by Liang Yue earlier. More than a month ago, a large-scale selection of suitable personnel had quietly begun in various parts of China and even around the world. Among them, some were high-profile, such as Wakanda, the Vatican, etc., countries where traditional authoritarianism still prevails despite being in modern society. Others were subtle, quietly using physical examinations, epidemic prevention, and other forms as cover to conduct the tests without making a sound. Of course, most countries on Earth have shown great enthusiasm for this selection process. After obtaining the testing equipment from Liang Yue, they immediately began verification work without stopping. However, their actions are not necessarily solely for preparing for Liang Yue's superpower academy. For example, right now, Liang Yue is standing at the gate of his small-town farm, accompanied by Meng Xianwu, Aunt Liu, Sister Lu Yao, Guna, Tina, and Mileva, and an official from the relevant domestic authorities who was sent to preside over this personnel selection interview. The level is very high. When the group walked out of the farm gate, crossed the imitation ancient arch bridge built over several winding rivers dozens of meters away, and arrived at a wide spaceport. A team of more than 2,000 people was already standing there under the clear blue sky. A group of young men and women were standing in neat square formations on the gray, thick, and flat stone ground, and a youthful atmosphere immediately came to greet them. At this time, China had already entered autumn, and due to the small-scale climate regulator, the climate around the farm was very comfortable. It can definitely be described as flowing water, surrounded by green trees, gentle breeze, and clear sky. Therefore, although these 2,000 people were standing upright under the supervision of the instructors, and the whole place was silent, their overall state seemed somewhat active. This is undoubtedly a huge temptation and shock for these young people who are mostly 17 or 18, 23 or 24, and no more than 26 or 27 years old. After all, who hasn't been young and vigorous, as Chinese people, who hasn't had a grand vision of traveling the world with a sword in their youth, then gaining superpowers, being surrounded by magic, and even transcending into sainthood and cultivating immortality? Especially in the current Marvel world, you can often see some superheroes and mutants flying around on TV, and from time to time, characters that only exist in myths and legends will fall from the sky. It can be said that for the people of this world, fantasy magic and cultivating to attain enlightenment may be difficult, but in fact, they are not far from them under this background and environment. They naturally yearn to become a superpower person far more than those who live in a purely ordinary world where the extraordinary only exists in legends. After all, this is actually a visible goal, and at this moment, they seem to be about to come into contact with a real extraordinary world. However, these are the talents we have selected from all over the country, various schools, universities, institutions, and even families. After careful consideration, each and every one of them is at this time. The high-ranking old man beside Liang Yue was introducing the 2,000 people opposite with a kind smile on his face, but before he could finish his words, Liang Yue directly waved his hand to interrupt him. "These are the student candidates you sent me after all your hard work and layers of selection." As he said, Liang Yue paused, frowned slightly, and a smile mixed with coldness involuntarily appeared on his face. Then, he waved his sleeve, and 20 or 30 people suddenly rose from various corners of the opposite crowd. Just like that, in full view of everyone, they flew to the front of the entire team with his palm. These few have good qualifications, and can be regarded as above average. From the island country, South Korea, Annam, the United States, and Western European countries. As he said, Liang Yue gently clenched his originally outstretched palm. Suddenly, Those nearly 30 young people who were floating in the air, with nervousness mixed with a few expectations, just like that, under the gaze of everyone in the field, whoosh, in an instant, the team that was originally standing neatly opposite trembled and subconsciously took a few steps back. Some of the timid ones even screamed and hid in the crowd. However, they were quickly pacified by the instructors next to the queue. Hearing his words, the old man, who was originally smiling, suddenly froze and turned embarrassed. It's not over yet then. Liang Yue waved his sleeve again, and a pile of people floated up from the crowd opposite. Again, this time there were many people, densely packed, looking like 200 or 300, having learned from the previous example. This group of people who were floated into the air this time almost all looked extremely frightened, so, shouts, struggles, threats, wails, roars. For a time, it was endless. These people, are they from Taiwan? As he said, Liang Yue glanced at the old man beside him strangely, and then continued, it's not wrong to be from Taiwan, but the problem is the talent of this group you recruited is not very good, barely considered mediocre, or even below average. Those who are willing to support the unification and have good qualifications have been left by me. You can handle these. After speaking, Liang Yue didn't kill those young people in mid-air again, but waved his hand and threw them outside the team. However, things are far from over. In the following time, Liang Yue began to pick and choose in front of the chief. He beckoned them to come, and waved them away, as if he was sifting rice in a vegetable market, kneading the originally neat square queue opposite into scattered sand. These people do not have Chinese nationality, and basically belong to the children of immigrants who went overseas in their early years. Their qualifications are also mediocre. How could they be put in the candidate queue? This group of people is also not good. Although they have some qualifications, they basically hover in the lower middle range. The reason why they can pass your selection is probably because they have noble identities and their families are mostly civil servants, right? What's the situation with these people? They don't have any qualifications at all, but they were put in the team. Research branch personnel reserve? Xiao Wu. I checked their usual grades in school too, mediocre. Even their admission was directly through interviews. Except for having parents or older generations who are scientific researchers, there is nothing worth paying attention to. Chapter 877 Divine Mantra to Purify Heaven and Earth. I never expected that taking on a student would attract the attention of the Hell Dimension. With a casual flick of my finger, the tattered canvas formed by the evil spirit was instantly reduced to powder, disappearing into the air. Today's student selection ends here. The rest of you, and you, come with me. As he spoke, Liang Yue looked at the now rather sparse group of 100 or 200 people in the opposite line, as well as the little girl beside them, and said to them. After that, his gaze turned to the old man on the side, whose expression was hard to tell whether it was unpleasant or filled with emotion. The old leader immediately snapped back to reality, smacked his lips subconsciously, and explained to him, this time, you put a lot of thought into carefully selecting this batch of second-generation individuals, but unfortunately, your intentions were not right. Hearing this, Liang Yue didn't bother to waste any more words with him. He simply waved his hand at him, and a golden light instantly appeared around the old man, instantly transforming into a cylindrical cage half a meter wide, binding him in place. Then he continued, so, a small punishment as a warning? Standing for 3 days. After speaking, Liang Yue ignored him, flicked his sleeves, and turned to walk into the small town up. Sigh. The old man was stunned upon hearing this. He probably never imagined that at his age and status, he would be reduced to being made to stand as punishment. And Liu and the others beside him, as well as the soldiers who had rushed over, were also looking horrified. However, the old leader was quite open-minded, sighed softly, and waved his hand at them. Then he gestured to the little girl beside him, as well as the nearly 200 people who had been selected on the tarmac, signaling them to hurry and follow. You're being a bit too much. Even if you don't consider his level and status, you should at least consider his age. He's an old man in his 70s, and you're making him stand there for 3 days. As he walked, a series of footsteps closely followed behind him. It was his little secretary, Meng Xiaoyu. At this time, the girl's face was full of indignation, but deep in her expression, there was also a hint of unspeakable meaning, seemingly carrying some joy, which even she herself might not have noticed. They brought it upon themselves. Since the relevant parties used that bunch of second-generation individuals to perfunctorily deal with me, then they should be prepared to bear the consequences. This time is just a warning. That old man is just being used as a chicken to scare the monkeys. If there's a next time, our cooperation will end here. After speaking, Liang Yue ignored Meng Xiaoyu and went straight to a gazebo inside his own farm. Then, he naturally came to the stone table in the center, spread out paper, and prepared ink with a flick of his sleeve. He took out a writing brush made from the hairs he had plucked from his own exclusive life guardian war beast, the light and dark holy bear, dipped it in the inkstone, and prepared to write down the defense measures. The appearance of the hellish evil spirit was an accident and a wake-up call for Liang Yue, although, for himself, he would not be afraid of these small yin spirit monsters at all. Even if the legendary Hell Demon King Mephisto personally came to confront him, Liang Yue would not be afraid at all. He even had some faint expectations in his heart. However, there would be times when Liang Yue himself was not around, and he could not always stay in the small town farm. The reason why he had been staying here for this period of time was just that he was adjusting his own state of mind, checking for omissions, and preparing to face his immortal ascension tribulation in full bloom. But the appearance of that hellish evil spirit was not a good sign. He was not afraid, but that did not mean that the others in the farm could deal with it safely. In short, China was still too comfortable for some inexplicable reason. There had been no evil spirits or demons causing trouble since the founding of the country. In addition, in the later period of time, the country was messing around on its own, and many of the inheritance aspects had been lost. Even if there were many capable people and strangers, most of them lacked the experience to deal with this kind of evil existence. Liang Yue felt that he needed to leave some backup plans in advance to prevent problems before they happened. Heaven and earth are natural, and foul energies are dispersed. The mysteries in the cave are vast and bright. The divine might of the 8 directions makes me natural. The talisman decree of the spiritual treasure is widely proclaimed to the 9 heavens. Qian Lo Dan Na, Donggang Taijuan, slay demons and bind evil, save people. That's right. In order to prevent the intrusion of these evil spirits, the means that Liang Yue prepared to leave behind was the purifying heaven and earth divine incantation, which is among the 8 great divine incantations of Taoism. In addition, Liang Yue's current realm of cultivation, his achievements in the way of talismans, and even his calligraphy level, this purifying heaven and earth divine incantation written by himself is naturally extraordinary. In fact, from the moment he picked up the pen and dipped it in ink, and began to write the first word, with a waving of the brush and ink, and the movement of mana as he wished, there were visions in this world. At first, the vision was still very weak, but as his brush moved like a dragon and snake, leaving behind words containing golden purple brilliance on the paper. But as time went by, as the content of the purifying heaven and earth divine incantation was being completed bit by bit, the golden purple halo seemed to come alive, jumping out of the paper like lively little people, dancing happily around him in the air. Soon, the golden purple halo filled the gazebo, dyeing the tall and dense trees around it. Gradually, the air even began to vibrate faintly with his writing. It was a kind of resonance in the dark, as if it was connected with some kind of Tao and reason between heaven and earth. The air began to hum unconsciously but strangely. This vibration, which affected a considerable range, did not cause the slightest discomfort to the surrounding people, or even the livestock such as cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, and parrots raised on the farm. Instead, they all quieted down at this moment, staying in place with a kind of peace and comfort, with a calm expression, as if they were enjoying it. Then, the golden purple halo suddenly surged, rushing out of the entire small town in an instant, covering the entire sky around it. The vibration, which was originally only faintly visible, turned into a kind of ringing. At this moment it was the resonant sound formed by countless trembling waves, like the sound of heaven and earth, like Hongzhonglei's sound. Obscure, majestic, vast, and upright. Finally, it merged into one, turning into a low tone, and then naturally chanted and recited along with the notes in Liang Yue's hand. Every word uttered, the whole world would vibrate with a sense of righteousness in the dark, and the resonance of each word was accompanied by a very short moment of brilliance. The original blue sky, the green grass and trees, the heavy earth, and even all things in this world, would turn into the purest white in that instant. This is a purification reaction caused by the resonance between the divine incantation and the heaven and earth, which can cleanse all evil and filth in this world, including the deepest evil thoughts in people's hearts. Soon, when Liang Yue finished writing the last word of this purifying heaven and earth divine incantation, the chanting sound in the heaven and earth also stopped abruptly. The purification effect caused by the resonance also slowly subsided in an instant. The golden purple brilliance in the sky began to converge rapidly, like rolling clouds, and in just a few breaths, they all settled down and merged into the divine incantation calligraphy posted by Liang Yue. After a burst of brilliance was restrained, the whole calligraphy began to become simple and unpretentious, like an ordinary calligraphy work. At first glance, it looked like a calligraphy post full of words sprinkled with some golden purple broken petals. Chapter 878 Subspace Expansion. Was it this calligraphy that caused the celestial phenomenon just now? It looks quite ordinary, doesn't it? Meng Xiao approached the stone table, staring at the purifying heaven and earth mantra calligraphy with a curious expression, unable to resist commenting it's not ordinary, but rather a treasure with concealed radiance and settled spiritual charm. This purifying heaven and earth mantra may look simple and unadorned at the moment, but it is truly a supreme treasure of our Taoist school. An old Taoist priest, relying on his agility, squeezed into the gazebo ahead of everyone else, stroking his beard while praising it with shining eyes. With this mantra here, I fear no evil spirits or demons can harm this small city anymore. Even the entire northwest region will benefit greatly from this. A burly monk beside him also wore an expression of envy, his round eyes fixed on the calligraphy, as if trying to discern some profound secrets. Before long, Liang Yue was surrounded by a crowd after he finished writing the purifying heaven and earth mantra. When the celestial phenomenon disappeared, a group of people who had been entrenched in the small city's farm, studying their own cultivation methods and the mysteries of the world's spiritual energy, quickly rushed over from all directions. Each of them, originally in their 70s or 80s, usually kind and gentle old fellows, suddenly burst out with astonishing speed, bouncing and running. They emerged from the treetops of the surrounding tall trees and from hidden corners. Ignoring the crowd by the stone table, Liang Yue came to a tall peach tree beside the pavilion, next to a stream 3 or 4 meters wide, with fish ponds connected to both ends of the stream. Speaking of which, everything about my current farm is good, except that the layout and planning at the beginning were a bit too much, so that the entire small city farm now appears to be completely full. Everywhere is lush with trees, fragrant with fruits and melons, or filled with farmland planted with various exotic alien vegetables, interspersed with leaf-shaped fish ponds scattered around. Basically, there is no vacant land left for development. There is space in the ranch area, but it is a bit far from the side of the small city near the spaceport now. Liang Yue wants to recruit students to prepare for his future extraordinary academy. A group of second-generation individuals have been sent from China. Although after some selection, only less than 200 people remain, he can't directly send this group of people to his life planet. He has to find a place on the farm to settle them down first. The accommodation problem is easy to solve. In the past, the intelligent AI, Xiao, built many dormitory buildings and even entertainment facilities on the farm. In addition to the daily staff, various professors, soldiers, and people from both Buddhist and Taoist families, it's no problem to accommodate an extra 1,000 people. However, Liang Yue doesn't want to make these early students wait here all the time. In addition, nearly 2,000 or 3,000 more students will arrive sporadically in the future. Therefore, for long-term consideration, he decided to open up a special area on his farm for the early teaching of this batch of pre-kindergarten students. Fortunately, this is not too difficult for Liang Yue at this time. Well, let's make it here. The environment looks okay. After walking out of the pavilion, Liang Yue walked a few steps in the woodland and soon came to a tall orchard. This woodland has almost no characteristics except that it is adjacent to a leaf-shaped fish pond. The fruit trees are the same as in other parts of the farm, basically 7 or 8 meters high, with luxuriant branches and beautiful postures, covered with tender white and red peaches. Monotonous. But just in the next moment, as Liang Yue's footsteps paused slightly, the entire earth seemed to come alive at this moment, and began to quickly spread to the surrounding area. With the place where he stood as the center, it instantly expanded in all directions. During the process, the world was blurred, and only he seemed surreal in this space. In just a moment, the originally dense and lush fruit trees around him retreated thousands of meters away out of thin air. In fact, it was not the fruit trees that were retreating, but the space around Liang Yue was expanded after continuous irrigation with a diluted version of the emerald green liquid. The desertified sandy soil in the small city farm has now been improved into fertile dark brown soil. At this moment, this space that seemed to have appeared out of thin air under Liang Yue's feet was also full of such fertile soil, and this newly expanded area by him is not large, about a circular space with a radius of more than 5,000 meters, which is only about 20 square kilometers when converted. Moreover, although this land seems to be seamlessly connected to the small city farm, it is actually another subspace. It is the same in essence as the subspace that Liang Yue entered when he found the reality stone, the ether, the inheritance secret weapon of the dark elves, in the abandoned factory in London. Before, of course, this mere 20 square kilometers of area is definitely not the limit of the space that Liang Yue can expand now. However, his current purpose is only to open up a temporary place to teach the pre-kindergarten members of his academy, so this size is actually enough. Soon, Liang Yue summoned the intelligent AI Xiao, slightly designed and modified the plan in his mind. and then he began to transform and build on this fresh land. Then, about half an hour later, the construction work was completed. It's just that the temporary teaching venue after it took shape was a little bigger than Liang Yue's previous plan. Well, it's about 10 times bigger. The reason is that the intelligent AI Xiao suggested that he introduce a stream into this teaching area to connect the water source and also cultivate some scenery. Liang Yue thought it made sense, but when he used his hand as a plow to outline the land, he found that connecting a stream seemed not as good as directly opening a lake here. But if this lake is too small, it is basically no different from the fish ponds on the farm. So, Liang Yue, this guy, finally forcibly expanded another 200 square kilometers on the original 20 square kilometers of subspace land. Among them, the surface area of the lake is about 210 square kilometers, accounting for 1/10 of the original area of the small city farm. The remaining teaching building complex, small square, green area, etc., are less than 10 square kilometers. I can understand building a new teaching building, or even a school district, for teaching students. But what are you doing with such a large lake? A lake of more than 200 square kilometers is naturally not so easy to fill. When Aunt Liu, Meng Xianwu, Guna and others brought nearly 200 students behind them, the wide lake surface was still being poured in large amounts of water. The lake created by Liang Yue is not very deep, about 1 to 10 meters deep in the shallows, and only less than 100 meters deep in the deep water area. There are 8 places where the lake surface is interconnected with the outside streams, and Liang Yue also released more than a dozen infinite water sources in all directions along the lake line for water injection. But even so, it is estimated that the entire lake area will take at least half a day to fill at that time, with vast misty waves, birds flying across the sky, lush trees surrounding it, and water rippling. This will surely become a new place of vitality inside the small city farm. Do whatever you want to do, accompanied by the sound of gurgling water. Liang Yue said so. Chapter 879 5 Creation Gods. Let me start by telling you about the situation in this world. In the newly built teaching area, in the middle of the lake that was still gushing with water, Liang Yue manipulated the earth to create an island, with a solid trestle bridge connecting the island to the shore. Soon, following Liang Yue and the others' footsteps, a building similar to the Temple of Heaven rose on the island. However, compared to the one in Yanjing City, the Temple of Heaven in front of them had the center of the altar as the origin, surrounded by more than a dozen layers of sloping, tall stone steps. From a distance, the entire building looked like a round bowl with a slightly higher middle, with the overall color being black and red. The building area was indeed not small. According to Liang Yue's vision, this place would serve as a relatively formal martial arts arena in the future. After a while, the group arrived on the island. The circular building in front of them was not static. As time passed, it was becoming more and more exquisite and magnificent. Originally, when viewed from a distance, this circular cylindrical building seemed to be just a rough stone embryo. Now, as the group approached step by step, the building seemed to evolve on its own, constantly being carved and sculpted. The surrounding tall stone wall was transforming into a pavilion with carved beams and painted pillars at a speed visible to the naked eye. Inside the wall, the originally uniform piece of stone gradually evolved into different materials. Patterns and brick seams crawled all over the wall on their own. The top of the tall stone wall transformed into a corridor with flying eaves and brackets, adorned with lanterns and copper bells at intervals. When Liang Yue led the group into the arched, tall doorway, 2-3 meter high, regular white jade stones extended from the walls on both sides of the entrance. In just a few breaths, they transformed into 2 imposing stone-carved killing. Then, the floating carvings on both sides of the doorway, the blue stone underfoot, the red lacquered wooden railings inside the building, and even the thick carpets that slowly grew on the stone steps of the stands. These changes were truly overwhelming. Aunt Liu, Meng Xianwu, Tina, and even a group of monks, Taoists, and old professors who had come to visit were already dumbfounded, not to mention those students who, although talented, had basically never seen many mystical things and had not yet entered the door. It wasn't until Liang Yue walked to the tall stone platform in the center on his own and used a dust cleaning array to envelop the building that the various details and structures inside and outside the building were quietly changing. Most of the nearly 200 students, even though they had been directed by Aunt Liu and others to sit on the stone steps, were still in a daze, with their eyes glazed over. It wasn't until Liang Yue spoke that they seemed to wake up from a dream. Recovering from their initial immersion in dizziness, this world we are in is very magical. Technology and cultivation are equally important. There are technological civilizations that rely on the development of ethnic groups to gradually move towards the path of civilization, breaking through the shackles of planets and wandering the stars. There are also evolutionary paths that rely on the development of various cultivation systems and the inheritance of bloodlines to strengthen oneself, of course. Technology and cultivation do not conflict. To a certain extent, they can complement each other. I have so many magical things on my own life planet, and one of the main reasons for establishing the Extraordinary Academy is to promote a path of evolution with its own characteristics. There are gods in this entire universe we are in, and there are quite a few of them. However, most of them are just cultivators who have reached a certain stage on the path of self-cultivation or extraordinary development, like the Prince Thor from Asgard who appeared on the battlefield in New York before. According to our current research on various documents and materials, we can call him a god, because he and the Asgard civilization behind him did leave corresponding myths and legends on Earth. But it is also possible to call him an alien. The people of Asgard emphasize bloodline inheritance, supplemented by appropriate training in combat. Over time, their strength will become stronger and stronger. But what is bloodline? It is not because they are born with great power or because their race has any extraordinary talent, but because there have been powerful beings in that race. They have advanced their realm to a very high level, truly comprehended the essence of high-level rules, possessed great power, and then integrated these things into themselves and passed them down through the reproduction of bloodlines. In fact, the bloodline of the Asgardians is not too strong in the universe. It is basically the result of generations of struggle and accumulation. Therefore, with their own strength, they are qualified to be praised in this universe, give themselves various titles, and then delineate their own sphere of influence in the universe, guarding one side from the actual actions and deeds. They can indeed be called gods, but at best, they are just local gods. There are many gods like this in this universe. Their strengths vary, but most of them have their own areas of expertise and their own spheres of influence. Therefore, in order to avoid unnecessary conflicts, they have also jointly established an organization called the Pantheon, which seems to have been recognized by the official universe organization. As for what this official universe organization is called, you don't need to know. You probably won't have any chance to interact with them. There are 5 gods in our universe who have existed since the beginning of creation, namely annihilation, eternity, death, infinity, and devouring. They are born according to the rules of heaven and earth. Although they have their own independent images and wills, they are essentially a collection of abstract things. Among them, eternity has the closest relationship with Earth. It controls the time of the entire universe, and it has some inheritance and affiliation with the ancient magic temples on Earth. After each supreme mage steps down, their final destination will be to choose to follow this eternal god. Devouring may also come to Earth one day. What this god represents is the collection of the power of the rule of fairness in the entire universe, but her style of doing things is very unique. Whenever she is hungry, she will find a life planet and swallow it into her stomach, and everything on the planet will be destroyed as a result. However, this god has her own personality, and she also has many planet exploration teams from all over the universe, specializing in selecting backup food for her, of course. These things have little to do with you. I am saying them now just to give you a general cognitive system in your minds. If we really talk about the relationship with Earth, the Asgardians are actually our neighbors, and for a long time in the past, they have been acting as guardians of the Earth. Chapter 880: The World Tree and the 9 Planets. At this moment, while Liang Yue was explaining the current situation of the universe to the people below the stage, he wasn't just lecturing verbally. Along with his descriptions and explanations, the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu, also cooperated by projecting various light screens and holographic displays, conjuring up images of various native Marvel gods in mid-air. Some were majestic, others abstract and nihilist: eternity, death, infinity, Galactus, Grandmaster, and even Star-Lord's biological father, Ego, who exists as a planet. Some looked no different from ordinary people except for their attire, but others possessed extremely large bodies. Stars seemed like mere pebbles in front of them. And they were born to roam the cosmos. The teaching process was captivating, shocking the minds of everyone present, like watching a top-tier immersive holographic movie, unconsciously drawing them in. Soon, the huge holographic image above Liang Yue's head suddenly changed, and an abstract picture composed of a vast galaxy and countless space wormholes appeared. Where is Earth located in the universe? According to current textbooks and the astronomical cognitive system on Earth, Earth is located in the so-called Laniakea supercluster, Virgo supercluster, local group Milky Way, Orion Arm, Gould Belt, local bubble, Oort cloud, an ordinary third planet in the solar system. This is the universe coordinate that we Earthlings have established for ourselves. In short, it sounds very remote, but in fact, If viewed from another standard system, Earth is actually the center of the universe, at least in the eyes of a considerable number of people with the same worldview. This is indeed the case. Why is there this statement? The galaxy network above my head, which almost runs through the entire universe, is the answer. According to the statements and legends recorded by almost all gods, there seems to have been a world tree in this universe, which later died due to the God War and other reasons, but even though it has disappeared, its body network is still there, the traces of its body's existence, and the channels formed by its body's extension are still there within the main trunk network of the world tree. There are 9 life planets. Because they belong to the main trunk range of the world tree, many forces in the universe will habitually regard these 9 planets as a system of inheritance, although from the perspective of the scientific universe coordinate system, these 9 planets are far apart. With a huge physical distance, these 9 life planets on the world tree are very consistent with the myths and legends. They are Asgard, Vanaheim, and Alfheim, located at the top of the world tree, Nidavellir, Midgard, and Jotunheim, located in the middle part, and Svardalfheim, Muspelheim, and Niflheim, located at the root of the tree. Among them, Midgard, or Midgardr, is their name for Earth, and Earth is located in the center of the world tree's trunk. The rare astronomical spectacle that appeared in London, Britain last time, you all know about it, right? That situation was actually because the 9 realms, due to their own movement trajectories, were connected in a row in space under the connection of the world tree, causing a space-time phenomenon. Some cosmic rules were out of control at the time, which triggered many rare phenomena. The most eye-catching and most sought after by people was that we were standing on Earth with the naked eye alone. We could see some scenes in the other 9 realms. According to the previous rules, this astronomical phenomenon would occur about once every 5,000 years. It is precisely because the 9 realms coexist in such a natural connection of the world tree that not only other forces in the universe, but also many people within the 9 realms regard these 9 life planets as belonging to the same lineage to some extent, as a whole. Therefore, historically there have been many wars between the 9 realms, in order to compete for the dominance of this sphere of influence. The most recent dispute was won by the Asgardians. After they achieved victory, they naturally regarded themselves as the guardians of the 9 realms. They would send soldiers to some areas around the 9 realms to defend, garrison, and declare sovereignty in other forces in the universe and in the pantheon. Therefore, the Prince of Asgard, that is, Thor, after making a mistake, would be sent by his father to Earth for reflection and training. In addition, about half a year ago, when my interstellar spaceship was trying to fly out of the solar system, I once found a sentry post set up by the Asgardians on the opposite side of a wormhole located within the solar system. The existence of those people is a deterrent to external cosmic forces. To pass through the wormhole, a review is required occasionally. It will also serve as a supply station for passing ships. Of course, they do not restrict the passage of people like us who fly out from the Earth. Now we have reached a good cooperative relationship with them, so, to a certain extent, for us who have just acquired interstellar flight capabilities, this protection is a good thing. Soon, unknowingly, 3 days passed during this period. In addition to explaining the current situation of the entire Marvel Comprehensive World to his first batch of reserve students, Liang Yue also gave them some extra practical content on the second day in view of the fact that after this group of people enters their own life planet, they will directly step from a civilized society into a barbaric land. The main enemies and training goals they face will be various dinosaurs, carnivorous predators, ancient barbaric beasts, and various strange snakes, insects, rats, and ants, etc. And the survival situation is not optimistic. Therefore, in order to prepare some life-saving methods for them in advance, Liang Yue passed down a lightness skill. As a preparatory course for preschool education, it is worth mentioning that this lightness skill was not directly found by him from his various collections, but was a new skill created by Liang Yue specifically for the current situation of Marvel Earth, the level of martial arts, and the characteristics and style of dinosaurs and other murderers. It emphasizes simplicity, directness, quickness, and effectiveness. True ki, mana, and even magic, or even simply using physical strength, can be deployed and supplied with Liang Yue's current realm, strength, and knowledge. It is naturally not difficult to create a relatively basic lightness skill, so it only took him half a day in the evening to create and improve this lightness skill, and he also retained great potential for subsequent progress after these people's strength and realm are raised to a certain stage. Students who have a little ambition and talent can improve and upgrade this lightness skill with their own experience, behavior habits, etc. Of course, in addition to this group of reserved students, Liang Yue did not prohibit other people in the small-town farm from learning. Those eminent monks from the Buddhist and Taoist families, agricultural professors who came to retire, and the disciples who came with them, as well as the soldiers who helped on the farm, basically listened to Liang Yue's teaching. Of course, people are definitely different, just like, for this group of reserved students in his own school, Liang Yue directly distributed a wrist computer to each of them. The configuration is very good. It not only has all the functions of an Earth computer, but also the teaching video of that lightness skill has been saved in it. This thing, the staff in the farm do not have. As for Aunt Liu, Meng Xiao, Sister Lu Yao, Tina, Kuna, Mileva and others, their treatment is even better. They already have wrist computers, and they are even higher level Xiao Wu clones. The teaching of lightness skills was directly inputted into their brains by Liang Yue in the form of telepathic transmission. Chapter 881 Small Town Farm Portal. 3 days had passed at the entrance of Xiaochang Farm. The old chief who had been made to stand at attention by Liang Yue had naturally reached the end of his punishment, although, due to professional talents helping him plan his diet and sort out his lifestyle all year round, the old man's body had always been well maintained. Fortunately, Liang Yue didn't have to worry about these things. In fact, from the first day the chief was made to stand at attention, a group of medical staff and guards had rushed to the scene. Various medical testing equipment, temporary sunshades, and even the highest level version of gene therapy pods were all equipped and placed next to him once the 3 days were over and the golden light curse disappeared. The old man was carried into the therapy pod by the long-waiting medical staff for a deep conditioning and nursing. Frankly speaking, this old leader had taken the fall for many people in China this time, and was punished. Although Liang Yue didn't know his name, after the standing at attention incident, his attitude should have been clearly conveyed to many people. Obviously, Liang Yue was not a pushover, and would not be manipulated by others if they wanted to engage in similar methods of stuffing people in, such as dividing the cake or distributing benefits. They would probably have to weigh the consequences in comparison. The old man's punishment was a small matter, anyway. The medical treatment was directly maxed out. Although he may have suffered a bit during the process, there would basically be no major problems afterward. Therefore, while Liang Yue was leading his selected preparatory students, or rather, 274 young people, in cultivation within the farm, and teaching them some common sense of cultivation, the outside world was not peaceful after all. According to the old man, the previous 2,000 people were all talents they had carefully and meticulously selected. Although, from a certain perspective, they may not have met Liang Yue's selection criteria, the official perspective was not necessarily the same. More than 2,000 people were picked and chosen, and in the end, only less than 300 remained. The acceptance rate was only 1/10. This was too disrespectful. Moreover, the matter of making the old man stand at attention for 3 days was a bit too much in the eyes of some people. Yes, too much. Although this day and age is no longer the era of punishment does not extend to high officials, the principle still holds. In fact, to put it bluntly, many people in the outside world, including some existences at the official level in China, were somewhat surprised and dissatisfied with Liang Yue's strong attitude and countermeasures in this matter. Fortunately, the relevant parties did not want this small episode to affect their good cooperation prospects with Liang Yue. Not only at the official level, but even the old leader who was made to stand at attention himself had this attitude. Regarding this point, they had conveyed this intention to him through Aunt Liu, Sister Lu Yao, and Meng Xiao. When the standing at attention time reached the second day, in addition, the dozens of spies who were identified and turned into blood balls on the spot by Liang Yue during the selection process from the previous 2,000 people also attracted considerable attention at a certain level. After all, regardless of the qualifications of the previous 2,000 people or their family backgrounds, since they were able to pass the layers of review and gamesmanship by the relevant domestic authorities and be granted the qualifications to enter Liang Yue's Superpower Academy for study, then the first thing to be considered must naturally be one of their own. Being of good background and standing on the right side is a major prerequisite for entering the sights of the relevant parties. Under this circumstance, the fact that external forces could unknowingly take advantage of the situation meant that the problem conveyed here was very serious. Therefore, according to Meng Xiao, a certain level has been studying these 3 days, wanting to carry out a comprehensive investigation within the entire system, and then identify the enemy and eliminate foreign pests and other major actions. First of all, the family members of the dozens of people he had crushed to death have naturally been summoned, detained, and guarded by the relevant authorities at the first time. How to interrogate them, how to extend from this, and seize new clues to make breakthroughs, That is naturally the responsibility of professional personnel as for the issue of the admission qualifications of applicants to his own academy. Liang Yue also has his own set of logic, and after this incident, it has been updated to the official website of his farm last night. That's right. After Liang Yue's Xiaocheng farm was listed for business, the corresponding official website was also established accordingly. Originally, it was just a small attempt made by Meng Xiaoyu because there was too much cash flow in her hands, and she couldn't spend it on the account. It is said that she also spent a lot of money to hire the top professionals to design and build a portal website for Liang Yue's farm. Most of the time, it was in a state of idleness. In addition to daily maintenance, the daily work was to record and update the progress of farm construction, display the supply facilities inside Xiaocheng, and tell the daily life of the employees, etc. The most common thing to do is to share the beautiful scenery inside and outside Xiaocheng on the website, and upload beautiful photos and growth processes of various crops and livestock products in the farm. Even product promotion doesn't need it to do it. After all, the output of Xiaocheng farm does not need to be deliberately marketed. People who understand naturally understand. Those well-informed and resourceful people can't wait to make all kinds of vegetables, fruits, meat, eggs, and milk products in the farm exclusively supplied. But Liang Yue just wouldn't let them get their way, and directly set up direct sale stores in provincial capitals and major first-tier cities across the country. Every morning, airliners specially carry various freshly picked fruits and vegetables and meat food for transportation. Although Liang Yue's products are not cheap, just relying on the visible gimmicks of fresh picking and selling, alien varieties, and Airbus transportation, basically, when the store hasn't even opened in the morning, people who need their dishes have already consciously lined up in long queues. In addition, the nourishment of the abundant spiritual energy of heaven and earth inside Xiaocheng makes this series of products almost unparalleled in quality and has many benefits. As long as you eat it once, you can truly experience the difference between ordinary fruit trees, meat, eggs, and it. Under this circumstance, the products sold in the farm have naturally become popular and deeply loved and sought after by all kinds of people and people of all classes. Back to the topic. In the past, the official website of Xiaocheng farm was just a facade. Although it had unknowingly attracted a wave of fans due to the quality of its products, it was only regarded as an ordinary agricultural product website, and not much attention was paid to it on weekdays. However, this does not include those professionals from major countries who have paid extraordinary attention and energy to Liang Yue. With this series of performances in recent years, and the big moves that often inadvertently subvert the world situation, Liang Yue has long become the object of extreme attention from all countries in the world. Compared to the fact that the products sold in the farm are very popular, although the official website did not have much information worth paying attention to before, it still entered the sight of those professional intelligence departments now. The standard requirements for the selection of students for his own superpower academy, announced by Liang Yue, will naturally soon be conveyed to the ears of some people through these departments. Chapter 882 School Rules. The enrollment standards set by Liang Yue weren't numerous, but each one hit the key points first, naturally, were the issues of aptitude and age. Considering the surprise that relevant departments in China had sent him previously, a team of over 2,000, close to 3,000 people, with only about 10 to 20% possessing medium or higher aptitudes, including those of medium level. This was clearly a malformed product resulting from too many ideas and too much personal agenda. Thus, on the aptitude front, which should have been a hard indicator for the cultivation path, Liang Yue set the minimum acceptance line at medium. The standard was that individuals with a mental or ki and blood strength reaching 14 points or more. Specifically, it could be referenced to Liang Yue's basic four-dimensional attributes. After his system awakening, theoretically, an average person without any special training methods would have an average level of 10 points, and the limit of their four-dimensional attributes would be 20 points. Among them, the spirit attribute corresponds to mental strength, while the constitution, strength, and agility attributes are linked to ki and blood power. After receiving the super soldier serum injection, Captain America's constitution and other attributes linked to ki and blood power probably reach the limit of an ordinary human's physique. 20 points is for Liang Yue, because he had transmigrated with his soul, possessing intelligence from the womb. His soul and spirit attributes were relatively strong, and he was born with a natural talent for vigorous spirit. Therefore, his spirit attribute was 18 points, which could be seen as extraordinary mental strength. Before the system awakened, he had almost reached the level of photographic memory during his school years, according to the standards that Liang Yue had previously established when handing over the aptitude detectors to various countries' governments. A spirit attribute of 12 points was considered low, 14 points medium, 16 points high, and 18 points special, as for 20 points. Innate full soul power. Judging from Liang Yue's own situation, reaching the limit of the human race without special training seemed not easy. As for the age limit for student enrollment, after the previous lesson, Liang Yue directly set a relatively broad standard of under 20 years old. The second criterion was aimed at those who came with their own cultivation and had undergone special training. Liang Yue initially didn't want to include this group of people in his student recruitment scope. After all, if you already have your own inheritance and identity, why bother running to his door? Furthermore, if you have methods for cultivation and becoming stronger, then you should continue practicing along your own path. Coming to him would not only mean betraying your original master, but Liang Yue would also have to spend extra time correcting and reversing your path, which would be less efficient than teaching a blank slate. However, it was obviously impossible to reject all of these people. After all, he couldn't refuse those from various countries' militaries, special official organizations, training classes, or even the inheritors of Buddhism and Taoism in China. Therefore, the second criterion for the enrollment qualifications of those with their own cultivation was that they needed to undergo a personal interview. The third criterion was to preemptively exclude some harmful individuals and serve as a warning to personnel from various countries. Specifically, it prohibited members of cults, those with depraved thoughts, and the mentally deficient from being selected. The reasons were self-evident. Although Liang Yue didn't intend to turn his life-bearing planet into a pure and innocent land, he also didn't want to see a situation of demons dancing wildly. In addition, according to his vision, the students selected into his academy needed to possess a certain level of moral standards and bottom lines. Furthermore, after enrollment, in addition to normal cultivation and activities, the school would continue to formulate a series of daily students' rules to constrain the personnel within the academy. Regarding this clause, Liang Yue was very reassured about the students selected from student groups, military groups, and other aspects in China, but he was afraid of those from foreign countries, although they were few in number. According to the plan, they would only account for 10% of the total number of students, but if precautions were not taken, their destructive power would be quite significant. Regarding this point, Liang Yue's own experiences as an exchange student in New York were enough to prove it. Back when he had just enrolled, he and a few of his friends were eating in the cafeteria, and just because the food on the table was a little more abundant, they were provoked by a few young hooligans. At the time, Liang Yue immediately beat those delinquents to the ground. In full view of everyone, he demonstrated a certain amount of force and determination, so he didn't receive much harassment afterward. But that didn't mean that everyone else was like that. He dared to fight those hooligans and win cleanly, but that didn't mean that others had that ability. During his time at school, Liang Yue often heard the boarding students in his class, especially the international exchange students, complaining that the school's security was bad, that they were being blackmailed by XXX, and that even their dormitories were being stolen from. In addition, things like campus violence, drug use, and forced relationships also occurred from time to time. Facts have proven that one rotten apple can spoil the whole barrel. Liang Yue naturally didn't want this kind of thing to happen in his academy, but thinking of those students who would come from all over the world in the future, with varying levels of quality, he naturally had to take precautions early. Finally, for the healthy operation of the campus environment, Liang Yue specifically noted that proselytizing and spreading various extreme ideologies were prohibited within the academy. In total, there were only these 4 conditions. The content wasn't much, but it could effectively prevent some unstable groups from mixing in. Even if some countries disregarded the rules at the time and wanted to muddle through, Liang Yue could still screen them again when the student candidates from various countries actually arrived, considering that the official organizations of various countries around the world needed to conduct large-scale general testing in a targeted manner after receiving the aptitude detectors he sent out. This efficiency, while not slow, could be said to be very fast either. Therefore, in order to urge the efficiency of the actions of various countries' governments, Liang Yue also additionally announced 2 other pieces of data on his own website. One of them was the current number of students who had already been admitted. The answer was also clear at a glance: a total of 274 people, all from China. But the problem was that Liang Yue had previously stated that the world was one, and China would exclusively occupy 90%. That is to say, the number of students from China would account for 90% of the total number of students. So, after a little calculation, the total number of student places obtained by countries around the world other than China was 30.4 average to the other 200 or so countries on Earth. That's less than 1 place. The meaning contained within was naturally self-evident. Liang Yue didn't need to say much, and the various countries could realize it themselves. Although this wasn't the final total number of places, This data of 30.4 did give the official organizations of various countries a considerable stimulus as a result. In just over half a day, the governments of various countries around the world sent diplomatic notes to the Chinese government and even to Liang Yue, asking about the truth of the matter. Most countries stated that Liang Yue's calculation method for the number of places was problematic, and many official institutions still harbored some illusions about the allocation ratio of student places, hoping that Liang Yue could be fair. Unfortunately, someone on this side was too lazy to reply to them at all. On the other hand, the Chinese government seemed to be having a bit of a headache because of this matter. Although it was still unclear how they were responding, they had already conveyed a promise to him through Liang Yue that was, they would definitely complete the selection of students as soon as possible, abandon various negative factors, and select high-quality cultivation talents based on merit. In short, the effect was very obvious. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 883 Mutation Spirit Gourd. Who would have thought that the first thing to evolve in my little town would be a gourd? Surrounded by lush trees and laden with fruit, a small vegetable garden lay prostrate on one side of the farm plantation, near the city wall. Liang Yue was currently standing within it, next to a gourd vine that was somewhat small, delicate, but exceptionally vibrant in color compared to its counterparts in the surrounding vegetable garden. This gourd vine seemed more hydrated, and the colors of its vines and leaves were particularly verdant. One by one, crystal clear, jade-like gourds of varying sizes displayed a deep emerald green color, and beneath the cover of those green leaves and gourds, there was also an exceptionally translucent, crystalline object. This was also a gourd, compared to its brothers and sisters around it. It also possessed a pleasing emerald green color, and its size was only slightly larger than an adult's palm, but under the sunlight, it was presenting a faint, translucent appearance. This thing, has it already advanced to a spirit grade crop? Tina, Guna, Mirava, and Liang Yue were also present next to Liang Yue, and the light and dark holy bear at their feet, after hearing his words, curiously reached out to touch the surface of the gourd. Then, they opened the video recording and photo-taking functions of Little Wu's clone, taking a series of intense shots of the little gourd. The little fellow, Dundon, even directly opened his mouth and bit into half-grown gourd, chewed it a couple of times, and spat it out. Feeling that it was nothing special, several elderly experts who happened to be observing the growth of the plants nearby also immediately came over to watch. After hearing his words, to call it spirit grade now is a bit of a stretch, but if it continues to develop at this rate, it should be able to successfully advance in about half a year to a year. After gently tapping it with his finger, Liang Yue shifted his attention to the leaves of the gourd vine and carefully examined them. The mutation of this gourd was naturally not accidental. Although they all sprouted and grew from seeds selected in batches, since it could nurture such a benignly mutated fruit at a glance, in addition to the abundant spiritual energy of the world providing a large environment, it itself was naturally excellent enough. Then, what is the use of this gourd after it grows into a spirit grade? It should be much stronger than ordinary gourds, right? Guna asked at this time, moving her feet and taking pictures of the little gourd from various angles, with a face full of surprise and excitement. Obviously, as a group of newcomers who had only recently come into contact with cultivation, they were curious about everything at this stage, just like Liang Yue back then. Judging from the texture and performance of this little gourd now, after it grows up, it should have the effect of isolating the loss of spiritual energy, and as a plant, it also has the instinct to continuously absorb spiritual energy combined with some special runes and formations. It should be able to be used to hold elixirs or wine. Liang Yue thought for a while and replied, "That's it? Nothing else?" Liang Yue seemed unsatisfied with the prospects of this little gourd upon hearing this, and looked at him with some suspicion. Specifically, it still depends on the creation of this thing itself. When it officially advances to become a spirit grade species, it will naturally trigger some qualitative changes and form some different functions. There is a certain degree of randomness, especially for this kind of thing that has evolved and mutated from ordinary species. Perhaps it can form some distinctive abilities, but after all, it is only entering the spirit grade, and the effect may not be too good. The key is to look at its own evolutionary potential. In the later stage, plants are definitely magical creations of the world. Although they are ordinary, it is really difficult to assess their potential, especially those seemingly ordinary roadside weeds, flowers and shrubs all over the mountains and plains, fruits and vegetables that people eat daily, etc. under the nourishment of the spiritual energy of the world, will more or less grow and evolve with it once you encounter those with deep opportunities. Being able to evolve from ordinary plants to the spirit grade is not all from level 1 to level 2, level 2 to level 3, and so on. It is possible to directly promote from ordinary to level 3 spirit plants, and it is also possible to jump directly from ordinary to intermediate spirit objects. Regarding this point, even if Liang Yue at this time is already a cultivator in the great perfection stage of the tribulation transcendence stage, and can advance to true immortal figure in the next step, if he only relies on the naked eye to judge, and does not use some unconventional means, it is also difficult to judge. Thinking of this, Liang Yue's mind moved in the next moment. The fertile soil that had already been improved to dark brown instantly retreated, with a gourd vine in front of him as the center, taking the surrounding plants and retreating continuously to the surroundings. Finally, a piece of open-air subspace with a radius of about 100 meters was formed. That's right. In order to facilitate the cultivation of this gourd that was about to be promoted to the spirit grade, Liang Yue once again used his special divine power to create an open-style subspace. Also, because of his special care, Meng Xianwu, Guna, and even those old experts around him did not show anything unusual, nor were they pushed into the distance by the expanded space. Only for a moment, when they came back to their senses, this space had been expanded. Then, Liang Yue flipped his sleeves, and a small ball of green liquid the size of a soybean suddenly appeared on the palm of his hand. It was precisely that kind of liquid that was derived from the green tree's own operation. You guys step back a little. After the people around him retreated 10 meters away, Liang Yue threw the liquid floating in his palm directly onto the main stem of the gourd vine. In the next moment, the emerald liquid merged into the plant without any hindrance. Immediately afterwards, the gourd vine, which was originally quietly rooted in the soil, began to twist continuously, as if it had come alive like a spiritual snake. As time went by, in just 5 or 6 seconds, the green vines began to swell, thicken, and lengthen at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a moment of carelessness, the main stem grew to half a meter thick and 20 meters long, and continued to extend, and the original solid trellis could not withstand this kind of tossing at all and directly fell apart. Fortunately, Liang Yue had prepared in advance and directly supported a wooden frame for it with his own mana. However, in just half a minute, the madly growing trend suddenly came to an abrupt end. The gourd vine, which was originally lush and vibrant, began to become wrinkled at this moment, and then even withered and wilted. The originally umbrella-like, powerful leaves began to shrink continuously, turning from emerald green and moist to dry and withered, as if they had suddenly died, and their vitality quickly weakened. The dozens of meters-long gourd vines that continued to climb into the sky also began to shrink continuously, withering and turning yellow, as if they had exhausted all their vitality. Incidentally, the dozens or hundreds of large and emerald green gourds hanging on the gourd vines were also affected by this, and began to turn yellow and wither from the inside, and finally shrunk into clusters of withered and rotten things. Only that small, crystal clear, jade green gourd that Liang Yue was optimistic about was still in good condition, and even more perfect. It can be said that the nutrients, spiritual essence, and vitality of the entire gourd vine have now been incorporated into it. The original palm-sized head has now grown to about 30 centimeters up and down, round and full. The gourd body is translucent, showing a translucent emerald green color in the sun, and reflecting a faint glow. The seeds inside its gourd body are now full of nutrients, and without the sunlight in the sky, they can already emit a clear green brilliance. A level 3 spirit plant. The entire mutated gourd vine finally fulfilled you. This gourd, which is quite promising. Holding this crystal clear gourd in his palm, he looked at it left and right, and then his other hand directly grabbed into the gourd body, and the gourd seeds that were flashing with a glowing green light were taken out by Liang Yue like this. Then, he dug a pit, buried the soil, sprinkled water, and built a frame, a whole set of planting processes. After the subsequent drip irrigation pipes are connected, these newly born spirit grade gourd vines can be officially incorporated into the farm's cultivation system. Chapter 884 Space Attributes. This gourd, is it already a level 3 spiritual object? What are its functions? After the sowing, transplanting, and erecting wooden frames in the surrounding plots were all taken care of, Tina and the others couldn't wait to gather around again, looking at the gourd in Liang Yue's hand that seemed to be completely jade-like, and asked, this little thing not bad luck? After being promoted to level 3 spiritual plant, the ability that has sublimated is a kind of space attribute characteristic. With a little refining you can nurture a small storage space in this gourd, which can be used to hold more spiritual objects, liquids, elixirs, or some other things. It can also be used to refine some not so powerful restraining or attacking magical treasures. In addition, this gourd naturally has the effect of absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and isolating the loss of spiritual energy. It's better for brewing wine. As he spoke, Liang Yue looked at the round and jade-like, crystal-clear spiritual gourd in his hand. Under the gaze of everyone, the mana in his body was quietly activated, and purple-golden, mysterious and ancient runes suddenly appeared around the gourd, and then instantly imprinted into it with the injection of the power of the runes and the mana of someone who is a peak cultivator in the tribulation transcending stage. This level 3 spiritual gourd in his palm also ushered in a qualitative change. In an instant the original vivid and natural posture remained unchanged, but the jade-like gourd body was already plated with a looming beautiful pattern. Moreover, Liang Yue himself was a great cultivator who mainly cultivated wood attribute spiritual power, and his mana contained extremely powerful life energy. Therefore, although the small spiritual gourd in front of him was refined into a magic weapon with a small space inside in an instant, its own vitality was not cut off because of this, but became more vibrant afterwards. Liang Yue also filled this gourd with some emerald green liquid that could promote the growth of various wood attribute spiritual objects and plants, and then threw it into this small spiritual gourd plantation, planning to focus on cultivating the spiritual objects in this small spiritual garden in the future. This newly sown spiritual gourd is just the beginning. As time goes by, there will definitely be more and more spiritual objects in this small city farm in the future. It's fine if some animals like cattle, sheep, chickens, and ducks are promoted, but if various plant fruit trees can advance, it will be just right to use the convenience of this emerald green liquid to carry out mass production and high-quality cultivation. And Liang Yue's idea undoubtedly coincided with the old experts who specialized in agriculture, and these old guys were also very curious about the magical species of spiritual plants that were born right in front of them. So after a round of enthusiastic discussions and active applications, they voluntarily took over the task of taking care of and cultivating these spiritual gourd seedlings from Liang Yue. Liang Yue's side still hasn't recruited enough students, and even, apart from China, other countries haven't even sent a few student candidates. However, this is not because the countries of the earth are not interested in Liang Yue's extraordinary student plan. On the contrary, the competition between countries is too fierce. For this reason, they have basically been busy with various displays of games and means around the quota issue during this period. Among them, there are scrambles from within their own countries, and there are also fierce confrontations between countries. The inducement for this is probably still the quota ratio set by Liang Yue. China accounts for 90% of the total number of students, and only 10% is left for countries around the world. And beforehand, there was already an agreement between the countries that the number of students in the first phase of the Extraordinary Academy would eventually be fixed at around 3,000, and in this cake, China will first cut away about 2,700 places, and the remaining 300 or so belong to countries around the world. If the remaining 200 or so countries are included, on average, each country can only get a little more than one place. This exaggerated ratio division plan is simply an insult to the Western countries that are still extremely powerful on Earth today. Among them, including various methods, passing words to him through the names of Elizabeth and Betty, playing the emotional card, etc., are just the most basic operations. Unfortunately, Liang Yue doesn't care about this pressure at all. Moreover, Elizabeth and Betty had already returned to the mortal great world to practice during this period, and they were not even on Earth under this circumstance. Liang Yue basically doesn't give anyone face, not to mention the Chinese government. How can there be any reason to push this obvious good thing out to share with everyone? As one of the 5 major players in the World United Organization, it is not so easy to be manipulated, especially after China has accepted a series of gifts and assistance from Liang Yue domestically. China is already different from the past, but now the situation has almost completely reversed. Various resources related to the national lifeline, such as minerals, oil, and grain, China basically does not need to obtain through the hands of others. The 4 minimalist small spaceships that Liang Yue previously leased to China can determine many problems, although these 4 spaceships are very efficient due to their own volume. The amount of transportation is far from enough to support the operation of the national industrial system, but it is precisely because of the existence of these 4 spaceships that those multinational forces and European and American organizations that control a large amount of territory and possess huge assets and resources on the Earth dare not gamble, because they are now unsure whether Liang Yue will take out more spaceships to lease to the relevant departments in China if they do so. Moreover, in today's China, with the digestion of various high-tech and black technology achievements, it seems that it has also achieved many enviable achievements. For example, the derivation and development of the gene therapy industry, the initial mastery of air passenger transport technology, and the gratifying progress in the field of the virtual world. These three major industries are of great importance. With the development and exposure of each field, they have been largely known by many well-known experts and media people from the outside world. Moreover, these three major industries have become recognized as great achievements related to the future development of mankind, and the leading industries that are clearly identified in the next industrial revolution on Earth. In addition, industries such as artificial intelligence and nuclear fusion reactors are also powerful competitive fields for the upcoming leap in human development. Unfortunately, in the latter two, the development level of several world powers is similar on the current Earth, with the United States and China being stronger. However, due to the blessing of certain decisive factors, the previous three major industries are almost all exclusively occupied by China. Faced with such a compelling situation, the traditional powers such as Europe and the United States no longer dare to be like they were decades ago, more than 10 years ago, or even a few years ago. Times have changed, although it has only been a few short years. The situation on Earth today is already different from the past. Therefore, facing the current China, even the United States, which claims that its only opponent is aliens, cannot come up with too many effective means, and can only use certain mechanism like checks and balances to restrict it. However, this method is difficult to see results in a short period of time. If the time is long, the gap may be widened even further. So, seeing that China seems to be determined this time and does not want to share the quotas of the Extraordinary Academy with them, the European and American countries can only start to prepare for both hands. On the one hand, they put pressure on Liang Yue and persuaded him with reason and emotion. On the other hand, they habitually set their sights on other countries on Earth. After all, on today's Earth, in addition to the 5 permanent members of the United Nations, the traditional powers of Europe and the United States, and the world's 5 major economic markets, the remaining 190 or so countries are basically living day by day. Some countries have no intention of becoming stronger at all and are completely lying flat, while others are willing but powerless, trapped in various restrictions set by their predecessors, and every step forward is extremely difficult. But whether it is active or passive, after all, only a few can muster the courage to choose to resist in the face of the coercion and intimidation of those developed countries. In most cases, most countries will choose to compromise. However, this time the situation seems to be a little different. Again, the set of rules for the selection of students for the Extraordinary Academy formulated by Liang Yue, although it seems to be very unfriendly to those forces that call themselves world powers, it is undoubtedly a boon for those small countries. And in this process, someone also very thoughtfully sent them qualification testing instruments specifically used to detect cultivation talent through China. Faced with this kind of competitive entry selection from a non-technological field, although China is dominant, it is a rare balance for other countries. This is the beginning of competition from another field, and no one wants to lag behind others. Again, wanting them to voluntarily give up their own country's quota and give it to those European and American powers is certainly not that easy. Therefore, in this process, although many countries were forced to choose to succumb for various reasons, there are still many small countries that are still persisting. For a time, the world situation seemed a little anxious. Although on the surface, the media and public opinion have been calm and harmonious these days, there is a turbulent undercurrent in the dark. Chapter 885 Star Trek Season 3. Despite the fact that the selection and competition for Academy personnel is still in a state of intense stalemate, most countries on Earth have not yet been able to send their own candidates. But today, many people from all over the world have once again gathered in the northwest of China because today is a special day. That's right, the third trip to Xander is about to set sail again in this new round of interstellar travel. The quota within the rules has been increased to 60 by Liang Yue compared to the last time. 15 more places have been added. However, under the control of Tina, Miral, and Guna, a relatively satisfactory and stable distribution of the quota issue has been reached. Simply put, the 3 women are still using the previous routine. First, they gave their own countries a batch of selfless contributions as citizens. Specifically, Guna and Miral each gave China and Maoshang 10 places. The number of places is the same as during the last trip, and there has been no change with the opening of the new trip and the increase in places. This point was decided after the 2 of them discussed with senior officials from China and Maoshang. Tina, on the other hand, only gave her own country, Ermao, 4 places this time, and each place needs to be repaid with US dollars. After experiencing the previous 2 trips, this girl has figured it out. The actual benefits and advantages obtained afterwards are not even as good as the pre-travel price of 2.5 to 2.6 billion US dollars per quota, which was deliberately suppressed by the world's major powers before the previous trip. Therefore, After discussing with her small team, Tina decided to reduce the supply of places. However, the 4 places she gave this time have been preset, exclusive to Irmao, that is to say, in this trip to Xander, Irmao's 4 places are fixed, cannot be traded, cannot be changed, and can only be used by people with Irmao nationality. Tina's reduction in the number of places given to her country is also due to this reason. Although this approach seems a bit naive to Liang Yue and others, it is a kind of cautious exploration after careful consideration by this girl. So the people around her did not say much in this way. In this interstellar journey, the number of places arranged in advance is 24, and the number of places that are actually drawn from donors according to the normal process has increased to 36. Many countries are gearing up for this, and fierce games have also broken out in the process, and have also been linked to the quota issue of the Extraordinary Academy. Therefore, during this period of time, although the public opinion field has been relatively stable, the overall ecological environment between countries is tending towards competition, and it is becoming increasingly fierce. This trip started very smoothly. Those individuals in countries who obtained places from the fierce competition and scramble had already moved into the town not far from the spaceport, or even closer areas, a few days in advance. Early this morning, with the help of a group of convoys and Chinese staff, these travelers and a large amount of luggage they brought were sent into the control area. Although the Dolphin spacecraft looks only 100 meters long from the outside, and its width is not even comparable to many seagoing freighters, its internal structure actually contains a considerable degree of high-end technology. In short, the intelligent brain Xiao Wu used his research on space technology to imitate this small broken building on Xander and opened up an extra space inside the Dolphin. Therefore, this small spacecraft has actually been carrying a huge structure and component configuration far exceeding its external image, especially the Dolphin's backup storage warehouse. Although this trip will carry more passengers with the increasing maturity of the travel program and the increasing understanding of the social environment of Xander by various countries, the various luggage carried by the travelers themselves has become more and more huge. But this is not a problem for the Dolphin. In more than an hour, the various luggage on the tarmac was filled. And then Liang Yue followed the previous process and took the passengers to the Asgard outpost to handle identity guarantees and related documents for the newcomers. Then, he entered the Xander star system through the space gate, and then passed the inspection of the other party's interstellar checkpoint and landed on Xander. The whole process went smoothly without any accidents or disturbances. The itinerary of this trip may be slightly changed. When this trip to Xander is about to end, I plan to take everyone to the Xianlin star, take a turn there, and then return directly to Earth through the interstellar portal there in the evening, accompanied by the unfamiliar vast galaxy and the neon scenery of the Xander city. Everyone gathered together at this moment and was arranged by Liang Yue on the top floor of the small broken building under the cover of a lush umbrella covering half of the side of everyone. A lively banquet is being held. The rooftop of the small broken building is brightly lit at this time. The landscape tree planted in the center of the building that runs through the upper and lower parts is also decorated with lights and filled with soft-colored lights accompanied by a soothing light music. When the banquet was halfway through, Liang Yue, as the host, announced this news to the 100 or so people in front of him. The so-called Xianlin star is actually Liang Yue's life planet, which is 3.78 times the size of the Earth's surface area. He named it. However, the naming requirements were put forward by the governments of various countries in China. After all, in the eyes of many people, although that life planet is someone's private property, it is also the first extraterrestrial land of human beings in the universe, and it can be called the second home of mankind. Whether from a realistic or symbolic point of view, it is of great significance. It is definitely not okay to not have a proper name. This proposal is very good, it suits my wishes. Stark, who was on the side, was holding a small plate and stuffing a white worm called a universally recognized delicacy into his mouth. After overcoming the initial feeling of nausea, he was eating with relish. And when he heard Liang Yue's itinerary plan, he immediately agreed. Nick Fury, Natasha, Captain America, Spider-Man Peter, Gwen, Sam, Michaela, Old Ross and others nearby also nodded in agreement. That's right, although there are only 60 travel places planned this time, there are actually quite a few people who followed Liang Yue to Xander through the back door outside the plan. Not only the United States, but also the British side sent a miniature accompanying team this time, and the banner is very authentic. There are 2 heavyweight members from the British royal family, a direct relative of Elizabeth, and an uncle. In short, it's the kind of relative. In addition, Liang Yue's classmate, Nizi, also came beside her. Is a 30-year-old, dignified and beautiful woman who is finally a Japanese official representative who has managed to win this travel place through various diplomatic means and huge compensation in addition, with the scientific researchers, national observers, and even market operators who stayed behind after the previous 2 travel programs. The small broken building is finally not so empty at this time. Fortunately, Liang Yue's rooftop of this small broken building is not small. After he expanded it with space magical powers, the upper and lower parts are integrated, and the regular area is as large as 5 or 6 football fields, not to mention the people at the banquet. Even the various types of pets that have not been sold after the last wave of travel can find their suitable place here. Chapter 886. The more I know, the less I want to say. Your mother is here. Do you want to come out and meet her? Your father is here. Do you want to come out and meet him? As the banquet drew to a close, with everyone well fed and the atmosphere gradually reaching its peak, the people on the rooftop had consciously gathered into groups according to their respective countries or prearranged alliances, discussing quietly. Liang Yue, on his side, casually opened the village communication platform and sent messages to Elizabeth and Betty, who were currently undergoing trials in the mortal world before him. The 2 families with whom he had the so-called father-in-law relationship had arrived together. One was a legitimate branch of the British royal family, and the other was a serving general in the United States, who would later take on the weighty position of Secretary of State. Therefore, as the mother of Elizabeth Stewart and the father of Betty Ross, these 2 individuals with such special identities had come to Xander on Liang Yue's exclusive dolphin travel spaceship, and the purpose was obviously not simple. Moreover, with Liang Yue's current level of cultivation, he could easily glean some clues from their words and actions during the banquet through his extraordinary hearing, eyesight, mental power, or any other sensory ability. In fact, Liang Yue didn't even need to guess based solely on the actions of various countries on Earth in recent days, and his understanding of the focal points of interest disputes. He could easily use some thoughtless, habitual thinking to judge the purpose of everyone's trip. In reality, it wasn't just the families of Elizabeth and Betty. The appearance of Sam, Peter, Gwen, Michaela, Nazi, and others was also intended to add some bargaining chips and weight in the eyes of certain people, and they had been deliberately invited. Otherwise, they, who could enter the base world and the public world at any time for training, would probably find it difficult to develop any interest in places like Xander or even Xianlin Star. It seems that the various countries on Earth really care about the Extraordinary Academy, but besides that, what the US and UK want should be more than just that. Leaning against the railing on the edge of the patio, Liang Yue, holding a batch of large leaves in his hand, unconsciously curved the corners of his mouth. But the expression on his face didn't show much emotional change. Sure enough, not long after Liang Yue sent the messages to the 2 women, about 5 or 6 minutes later, just as the people on the rooftop were preparing to leave the table and return to their rooms, and the intelligent robots controlled by the intelligent brain Xiao Wu began to clean up the various plates and debris around them, a flash of light suddenly appeared in front of him, and Elizabeth and Betty, whom he hadn't seen for many days, arrived on the scene. Compared to the convergence of the 9 planets a few days ago, the 2 women hadn't changed much at this time. Still tall and beautiful, of course, this no change was actually only for Liang Yue. And even Gwen and Nazi. For some other acquaintances present, the changes in the 2 women were absolutely astonishing. Elizabeth was fine. After all, she had just taken Asuka and a few others back to her hometown not long ago, but Betty had rarely gone out since signing with Liang Yue except for a few days when she accompanied Pepper Potts when Stark was attacked. She had been brushing dungeons in the base world and then training with the main force in the mortal world. Over time, she also developed a special temperament that had been precipitated by factors such as force, experience, and time. Skin widening, tenderizing, body proportions, and facial features becoming more coordinated, etc., were just standard byproducts of her own evolution as her own realm improved. At the very least, old Ross, as her father, was completely stunned when he saw his daughter Betty again at this time. He subconsciously rubbed his eyes and couldn't recover from this change for a long time afterwards. The old fellow took his daughter to a quieter central tree body under the colorful lights and asked about the changes in her. Speaking of old Ross, this guy actually had some psychological preparation for what happened around Liang Yue, especially since he himself had already experienced the benefits of the gene biochamber before. Just one recuperation had directly restored him from an old man in his 50s with a full head of white hair to a blonde middle-aged handsome guy who now looked only in his 30s. But the changes that happened to Betty in front of him were still a bit scary to him. This wasn't just a simple improvement in appearance, but a leap forward sublimation from the level of life from the inside out, although from the eyebrows, facial features, and face, relying on the familiarity of many years from childhood to adulthood, old Ross was able to determine that the noble woman in front of him was his daughter at first glance when he saw Betty, but when he looked closely again, he found that Betty was no longer the appearance he was originally familiar with and vaguely, the powerful old man who had been engaged in the professional military industry for many years and held a high position, at this moment, when facing his daughter, would actually instinctively feel a faint sense of awe from the bottom of his heart. This shocked him, and naturally filled his heart with questions. In contrast, Elizabeth's mother, uncle, and the two heavyweight figures from the British royal family were much more familiar with and adapted to Elizabeth. After all, they had just met not long ago, and their branch itself was a wizarding family. And they had at least heard of some things about cultivation realms and human sublimation on the mysterious side. For these third batch of travelers, Liang Yue still followed the previous treatment standards, and distributed wrist computers, translators, virtual connection tools, and 100,000 star points to each of them. Those who were able to hitch a ride with him because of their relationship with Liang Yue, such as Aunt Liu, Meng Xianwu, Gunna, Stark, Gwen, Peter, Sam, etc., in addition to the basic equipment treatment, were mostly given a million level of star coins. This naturally also included old Ross, who came for the first time, and those of Elizabeth's family. However, among this group of people who were qualified to hitch a ride, there were also some whose treatment was deliberately downgraded by Liang Yue. Nick Fury, Natasha, Captain America, Coulson, and the rest of S.H.I.E.L.D. were the ones whose travel expenses were directly reduced to the 100,000 level. To be honest, Liang Yue used to have a relatively good impression of the organization S.H.I.E.L.D., especially when he first entered the United States, when he still had a half knowledge of some things, or could simply be regarded as ignorant. But as his own experience increased, and his cultivation realm continued to strengthen, and his perspective on things became more comprehensive, he began to become more and more resistant to this force, and even had some negative views. Although Liang Yue also knew that a large part of the plot of the Marvel world revolved around the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. to some extent, the United States was the center of the Marvel world, and this organization was the core of it. But the more Liang Yue understood, the more he didn't want to see them including his extraordinary academy this time. Although in the previous days, Nick Fury, Natasha, Stark, and even Holland, Sam, and others who had gradually been absorbed into S.H.I.E.L.D. without realizing it, had not been less than him. But Liang Yue still didn't want to give them a single spot. Chapter 887 Xianlin Star. What were you thinking? In your eyes, world powers like England and America are being treated the same as Monaco, the Netherlands, or even small tribal-era countries like Samoa and Tuvalu, and you're only planning to give them one spot. It's indeed a bit inappropriate. If, in the end, world powers like England and America really only get one spot, it will undoubtedly be seen as a humiliation and a provocation. According to my own thinking, I didn't want to give them any at all. The reason they can still get one more spot than planned is just out of courtesy, and you call that courtesy? Exactly. Even just based on Stark and the others' relationship with you, they shouldn't only get one spot, right? Besides, does our reputation only worth as much to you? According to the normal development trend, England and America, which rely solely on sucking the blood of the world to supplement themselves, playing financial leverage, and continuing to deindustrialize their homelands, should have already begun to decline a few years ago. America is a little better, after all, its size is there. As for Britain, it has probably already begun its decline, becoming increasingly unable to cope. Your own set of rules has long determined this major trend, and it is basically impossible to reverse. Furthermore, this world is about cause and effect. Considering these two countries' past actions, the final outcome can only be that the higher they climb, the harder they fall. I personally have no interest in giving them a hand at this time. The brilliant starry night stretched across the deep purple sky, silently showing the world a magnificence originating from the vast galaxy. At this time, Liang Yue was lying on a soft and moderately firm big bed. The lights in the room seemed a bit dim and slightly warm. On either side of his arms, Elizabeth and Betty occupied their respective positions. That's right, ever since these two women were called out from the stronghold world, Kuna, Tina, and Mileva had voluntarily stepped aside. Moreover, it has now been 8 days since they came to Xander from Earth. During this period, Elizabeth and Betty can be said to have used all their skills, reasoning with emotion, and blowing pillow talk, all in order to win some places in the Xander Star Academy for their respective mother countries. As for the existence of Kana and the other two women, the two of them didn't seem to care much among them. Elizabeth seemed to have originally known these three classmates of a certain person, Back to the main topic. Just as Liang Yue had thought before, the two countries of England and America attached great importance to the Superhuman Academy, especially after old Ross personally saw the changes that had taken place in his daughter Betty and carefully inquired about them. He became even more serious about it. Even if the original upper limit of this cultivation method is not high, it is still worth their tireless pursuit. Exploring and excavating for hundreds or thousands of years, the current Marvel mixed world is not really the real world after all. There are originally all kinds of mystical inheritances here. And the Britain here is not the place in reality that takes myths and legends as history, constantly self-proclaiming and creating history in this world. There are indeed different cultivation systems and their respective divine veins. Even America, which has only 200 years of history, can't really explore any historical inheritance upwards, but in the modern stage, due to various reasons, it still hides many superhuman forces and mysterious existences. Moreover, as the center of the Marvel world, many mythological figures on Earth and even in the universe always like to run there when they have nothing to do. In addition, there are vampires, werewolves, and humans, mutants, gene enhancers, and the like. All kinds of powers are chaotic, unsystematic, and dazzling. It's either an accidental sudden mutation, or it's an alternative power that can only be stimulated by possessing some special bloodline, and some require reaching some harsh conditions to be eligible to join. Such as the church, this cannot be effectively promoted in a capital society that denies people's hearts under such circumstances. Liang Yue's Superhuman Academy plan naturally became a new choice in the eyes of many people after it was proposed, especially for those young people who were born in modern times and do not feel like they need to be devout believers or dedicate their lives to religions. The Superhuman Academy is indeed a good choice. Of course, the existence of Xander Star, this fresh and hot land, is actually a place full of fatal attraction at this stage. The existence of Xander Star is still an unknown place for the vast majority of people in the Earth world. The number of people who are qualified to understand or even know about such a place is also extremely small. Most of them are the privileged classes in various countries around the world, as well as a small number of elites. For this group of people, especially for the young people in this group, the Earth world itself is actually full of boredom and dullness. Some of these people are already standing at the peak at birth, possessing wealth and resources that others can never hope to reach in their lifetime. Others are born precocious and have already begun to see through the structure and operating rules of this world during their studies at school. Perhaps these people's hearts will be unwilling to be lonely, but under the current default social environment, it is basically impossible to stir up much waves. The emergence of Xander Star, and Liang Yue's Superhuman Academy plan that is about to set sail, has opened a window for them on another path that is still filled with hazy veils. Therefore, many people want to come and try after learning about such things, but unfortunately, the selection criteria for students that Liang Yue gave before were too harsh, or rather too fair. Except for China, each country, regardless of size, only has one more spot as a unit. In this world where strength, resource distribution, and various secular rights are obviously unevenly distributed, such a distribution plan will obviously cause dissatisfaction, or even indignation, among many people. However, perhaps Liang Yue had previously warned those who thought they had enough power and were used to doing whatever they wanted with the resources in their hands in his own way, wiping out a long-standing family that occupied a huge amount of wealth and resources directly from the earth within a short minute is enough to deter and dispel the courage of many people with ulterior motives to attack him. But it is also such a record that has made Liang Yue an invisible target for many people to pursue. Therefore, when this guy's Superhuman Academy plan was proposed, it was naturally highly anticipated, and even highly sought after. Chapter 888 Pillow Style. 100 for each family, that's the bottom line, and don't try to persuade me anymore. This is a one-time deal, never again. Finally, after being bombarded for over half a month by Elizabeth and Betty with persuasion, convincing, and pillow talk, Liang Yue finally relented. However, as he said, the reason why the two women's countries, England and America, could get these spots from him was essentially because they were pulling strings. The existence of this pathway was an extra benefit generated by Liang Yue's personal affection and emotions. It could only be done this once, unlike the normal process of selection and admission based on the rules he had previously established, which could not be treated equally. After hearing his reply, Elizabeth and Betty were clearly not satisfied with the hard-earned gains of the past half-month. Unfortunately, before they could try to say anything further, Liang Yue directly sent them back to the stronghold world. Correspondingly, the two women could naturally come out again, but Liang Yue had already made his attitude very clear on the matter, obviously not intending to budge any further, so they didn't bother to come again. Of course, This didn't prevent Elizabeth and Betty from appearing. After all, Elizabeth's mother and Betty's father were still here. Even if they weren't trying to persuade or use their charms on Liang Yue, they had plenty of reason to stay and accompany them. However, as the saying goes, there are no walls without cracks, and besides, neither family had any intention of keeping it a secret. In short, it quickly spread among the current traveling group that the British and American families had obtained extra enrollment places from Liang Yue through irregular means in the last few days of this interstellar journey. After Liang Yue brought his group to his own immortal forest star, some representative teams eager to expand their own quotas in the extraordinary academy came looking for him. However, Liang Yue was not so easily fooled for the British and American families, who had Betty, Elizabeth, and others as their excuse and reason. They could at least naturally claim to be countries related by marriage and appeal to him with emotions and reason, but for the remaining countries, things wouldn't be so simple. Whether from the perspective of intimacy, association, or interests, there were almost no countries on Earth that could evoke Liang Yue's compassion or satisfy certain desires, or very few. In this process, only Princess Shuri, representing the mysterious country of Wakanda hidden in the African savanna, exchanged vibranium for 10 places from Liang Yue at a price of 2 tons per person. Apart from this, no other country's delegation was able to obtain any places from him through back channels. Even with Yamamoto Neko, Liang Yue's former classmate and now a member of his close-knit group, standing up for Japan, he didn't budge. In short, at Liang Yue's current level, possessing a large number of surreal black technology achievements, a large number of super-armed forces, and having reached the pinnacle of the human realm, he naturally had the qualifications to set rules for his territory. He also had the qualifications to say no to some forces that were trying to take advantage of him in every possible way, even if the rules he set didn't seem so fair. Others could only follow his rules. They even had to painstakingly cater to some of his personal quirks. For example, in the process of Elizabeth and Betty persuading him, they had pointed out more than once that the British and American countries behind them were willing to sacrifice some other interests, or make transactions in exchange for places. The bargaining chips included cultural relics, documents, and even objects with mysterious powers that had fallen into the hands of the two families in various ways over the past century or several centuries. Unfortunately, Liang Yue now no longer cared about those things that were considered priceless in the eyes of the world. Those heavyweight figures from the British royal family who came along with Elizabeth's mother to hitch a ride had originally regarded these as heavyweight bargaining chips. But little did they know that Liang Yue, who traveled through various realms, had long ceased to care about such cultural relics and documents. It was those mysterious side objects, existing in various civilizations and schools of thought on Earth, and even remnants of alien civilizations, containing various abnormal powers, that aroused his curiosity. But it was only curiosity if the 20 tons of high-purity vibranium offered by Wakanda could be used as a good material for refining weapons in the hands of Liang Yue and his disciples, and consumed in those various unique mysterious side items placed in the secret vaults of many organizations were only good for satisfying his curiosity. The time stone is in the magic temple, and through this top treasure of the Marvel world, the successive Supreme Mages have been able to deal with powerful enemies from different dimensions of the multiverse. Similarly, S.H.I.E.L.D. would not offer the Mind Stone as a bargaining chip to negotiate with Liang Yue. By the way, perhaps due to the inertia of the plot, although there had been similar twists and turns before, the Mind Stone was no longer in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s possession when Liang Yue was still on Earth. During an occasional display of his divine sense, he discovered its traces in an underground laboratory in a small country in Eastern Europe. But even so, Nick Fury, as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., still seemed confident and calm, with a look of wisdom in his grasp, and did not show any unusual emotions throughout the entire journey. Even when he came to him trying to achieve his strategic intentions through behind-the-scenes transactions, the egghead still looked calm, composed, full of majesty and seriousness, and proper. At this moment, a corner of the deep blue sky had already reflected the brilliant sunset glow, echoing the setting sun remaining on the horizon, appearing particularly vast and magnificent. On one side of the sunset glow was a towering and majestic giant tree rising from the ground, with a thick, tall, and wide canopy reaching into the clouds, as if one could not see the edge at a glance, even just around the main body of the tree. The sprawling root system emerging from under the ground covered an area far beyond the reach of ordinary people. Around the thick trunk of the giant tree, there was also a magic halo shimmering with deep colorful halos. As the halo slowly moved, countless light spots were gradually spreading outward, like countless fireflies of various colors, gently flying and fluttering. As night approached and the sky became increasingly dim, these light spots were able to emit a softer and more gorgeous halo, illuminating everything around them into a secret realm that seemed to exist only in legends. Chapter 889 Colorful Night. At this time, Elizabeth and Betty were also visiting for the first time. Previously, they had been following Alwyn, Hinata, and others in dungeons, cultivating, and training in different public worlds. However, a planet like this, with a surface area more than 3 times that of Earth and in the late dinosaur era, was also full of novelty for them. After all, they had never seen dinosaurs before. In addition, after Liang Yue planted emerald saplings and a tree of life all over the world, the environment of this entire life planet was undergoing tremendous changes from what was originally just a life planet that had not yet developed intelligent life and was still in a barbaric stage. It suddenly became a world full of spiritual energy, various elements, and magic. Under the impetus of such a huge environmental change, many primitive species that were originally about to be eliminated at this stage were also bursting out with new vitality. It has only been half a year since Liang Yue bought this planet and planted all kinds of magical things here, but in these 6 months, the current Xianlin star has undergone many obvious changes. According to the records of the intelligent brain Xiao's monitoring system spread throughout the planet, the dinosaur family, which was originally at the end of its era, about to decline and shed its scales to grow various hairs, has ushered in a sudden turn in these short months under the nourishment and impetus of abundant heaven and earth spiritual energy. Thick scales, armor, and even exoskeletons are becoming an irreplaceable advantage on the exoskeleton of some organisms. Some magical changes have even appeared spontaneously, such as being able to independently absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and even increase hardness and toughness to body, muscle strength, bone density, and running speed of some predators have also begun to show varying degrees of strengthening. Of course, the magnitude of this change is still very small at present, just an evolutionary trend that may continue. In addition, various insects, birds, early mammals, marine fish, shells, etc., have also successively shown many positive signs of evolution. These signs are all magical and mysterious changes that accompany the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. And elemental magic, this kind of thing is too precious. In addition to being used for data collection and research, it also proves that this life planet is gradually embarking on another evolutionary path. A group of Earth people who came through the Stargate before, in addition to researching and searching for various useful material resources and data, this global species evolution phenomenon is also an extremely important research field, even the main research field of various national research teams, of course, compared to the research groups of various families. Elizabeth, Betty, the 2 newcomers, and even Elizabeth's mother, the 2 important figures of the British royal family, are more interested in the huge tree of life in the distance that is shining brightly in the sunset. After all, fundamentally speaking, the British royal family in this world is a veritable wizard family. Even those family members who cannot cultivate because they do not have the qualifications are still very obsessed with the power system of magic and wizards due to tradition and inertia of thinking. Therefore, after Liang Yue and others came to Xianlin Star and settled down, the 2 people from the British royal family, and Elizabeth's mother and uncle, have almost been staring at the giant tree surrounded by a magic halo. Looking into the distance, their faces were flushed, their chests heaved violently, and their eyes were full of longing and excitement. In comparison, although Elizabeth and Betty are a little better, they still show a strong interest in the existence of this tree of life. After all, when these 2 women were cultivating in the early stage, they all followed the magic route of the elven princess Alwyn, and then mixed in some body refining and even dark profession paths. With such a good thing, why didn't you take it out earlier, under the sunset? In the Chinese classical resort villa located outside the edge of the ground root system of the Tree of Life, Elizabeth was holding Liang Yue's arm and standing on the wide wooden balcony looking at the towering tree that was as majestic as a mountain in the distance. Feeling the unusually active elemental magic fluctuations in the air, she glanced at him with a slightly reproachful look. Betty on the other side was leaning against the wooden railing of the balcony, holding a panoramic sand table in one hand, and savoring the mysteries of the Tree of Life from the various data collected by the intelligent brain Xiao. Her eyes seemed to glow. It was about half a year ago that I photographed 3 Tree of Life saplings at an auction in Xander. This thing is relatively rare in this universe. Liang Yue was also looking at the big tree in the distance, while explaining the origin of this thing to the 2 women beside him. In just a few months, the current Tree of Life, and even the large plain area where the Tree of Life is located, have undergone tremendous changes on this land. The originally rich and diverse flora and fauna have now undergone an inevitable reshuffle in silence under the nourishment of abundant heaven and earth spiritual energy and elemental magic. Some plants are extremely adaptable and quickly accept the nutrients from the two mysterious energies, continuously strengthening themselves, and then transcending the limitations of the original species' attributes and embarking on the path of evolution. In comparison, those with slightly weaker adaptability and evolution speed will be squeezed out of their original living space in this process. Even an inconspicuous weed, a vine attached to a stone or branch, may take advantage of a spring breeze and rain to spread a large area of territory overnight, compete for nutrients, compete for living space, and kill nearby alien plants. Animals can run away directly and migrate to other places if they can't compete with each other, but for plants, the competition between them is even more cruel in a sense. In just a few months, the large plain area that was originally full of flowers and various plants and trees growing in competition has now become another look. Soon, as the sun sets and night falls, the surrounding light begins to dim slowly, but the earth, which should have been pitch black and full of moonlight and starlight if the luck was good, has now quietly evolved into another vibrant scene. Patches of luminous plants are swaying slowly in the night breeze. Among them, some have flowers on the crown that are blooming with bright fluorescent colors, with thousands of postures, while others have evolved different structural substances on their slender or thick leaves that can emit soft halos. Among these clusters of green grass and shrubs, occasionally a few small insects similar to fireflies will fly out, slowly flying in groups. Of course, relatively speaking, the most eye-catching thing in this night is still the tree of life, which is thousands of meters high and surrounded by colorful magic halos. On the huge, almost airtight canopy, pieces of oval, stretched tough leaves are now showing a translucent emerald green color while emitting visible colorful elemental power. It also reflects various star rays from the universe galaxy. This situation is not a cliché, but has countless and endless rich content, making people intoxicated in it, and unable to recover for a long time. Since you photographed 3 saplings in total, what are your plans for the other 2? Betty's eyes have now shifted from the panoramic sand table in her hand to the colorful but unusually harmonious night outside the villa. With her slightly heavy breathing, she finally recovered and looked at Liang Yue with a look of expectation. One of them has been planted in the summoning codex, and the other one, I planned to plant in the base world, but I haven't taken action yet. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 890. What is the special feature of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Those plants are truly magical. How could they evolve so quickly from their ordinary state to such a radiant appearance? The word evolution itself represents infinite possibilities. Then why has this scenery only appeared here? When it comes to survival and evolutionary conditions, the base world, and even DC, shouldn't be lacking. Perhaps it's a matter of opportune timing and chance. Are you saying it's accidental? It could also be due to differences in rules, or perhaps differences in evolutionary stages. These plants that can emit light autonomously may only exist for a limited time. After a certain stage, they will be replaced by something else that is more adapted to this environment. Being able to release light is, in itself, a superficial form of energy release. But if all they can do is release energy, they indeed won't last long in a world destined to become magical. I like these. Knock knock knock. While they were talking, the door to the room where Liang Yue and the 2 women were staying was suddenly knocked on. Relying on his Byakugan, which had evolved multiple times, his hearing far surpassing the mundane, and his divine sense, which remained exceptionally sensitive even when deliberately restrained and could naturally cover a vast area around him, Liang Yue instantly identified the visitor as Nick Fury, the black director of S.H.I.E.L.D. At that moment, this guy was standing outside the door, taking deep breaths with a serious and slightly nervous expression, as if adjusting his state. He was wearing a black leather jacket that looked like he had never washed it in his life. Needless to say, the reason this man came to find him was likely for the sake of the Extraordinary Academy's quota. Before this, during Liang Yue's trip to Xander with his team, although this black director had repeatedly hesitated, looking at him with a hopeful expression, he never spoke up. In the end now, he probably couldn't hold back anymore. Liang Yue glanced at Nick Fury through the walls, subconsciously curving the corners of his mouth. After signaling to the 2 women beside him, he walked towards the living room of the suite. At the same time, he also signaled to the intelligent assistant Xiao Wu to open the door and welcome the visitor. In the suite where Liang Yue was staying was a 2-story duplex structure, entirely decorated in a deep wood grain color in an antique style. However, although it was antique, the internal layout was still modern. After passing through the balcony and a connected leisure room, and then through a corridor. Liang Yue arrived at a staircase against the wall below. Nick Fury had just walked into the living room, and their eyes met after some professional adjustments. The black director now wore a solemn expression, appearing even more profound with the addition of his dark complexion after undergoing treatment in the gene therapy pod. His eye, which had been scratched by a cat, was completely restored. At this moment, when he looked at Liang Yue, his eyes were filled with determination. "I think you should know why I'm here, Liang Yue. Ever since I left this planet last time, I found it hard to forget, but now that I've come here again, it feels like it has gone through centuries. In such a world full of miracles and vitality, no one wants to be absent. Earthlings need this place, and humanity needs this place." Looking up at Liang Yue on the stairs, Nick Fury took the initiative to speak. "You can't represent all of humanity, let alone the Earth. Get straight to the point. What do you want?" Hearing this, Liang Yue subconsciously rolled his eyes, walked down the steps one by one, and came to the living room. Then, both of them walked slowly towards the French windows. Their gazes passed through the seemingly spotless windows, falling on the extraordinarily brilliant yet harmonious night scene outside. "What do I want? Aren't you clear?" Nick Fury asked, looking at Liang Yue with some helplessness on his face. "Then you should understand that in the rules I set before, only organizations with countries as units are qualified to get the quota for the Extraordinary Academy. S.H.I.E.L.D. is not on my list of partners." Liang Yue now had his hands behind his back, looking at the short grass swaying in the breeze outside, as if in a daze. To be honest, he didn't want to bother with Nick Fury right now. Simply put, because of Betty's persuasion and advice, the United States had already obtained 100 extra places for students from him. S.H.I.E.L.D's share should naturally be included in that. After all, this organization was originally a special organization, an extraordinary force belonging to the United States, even if it wasn't affiliated with the military or the political arena, but an agency with relatively independent authority. But this was an internal affair of the United States, so they naturally needed to coordinate it themselves. 100 places for extraordinary students might not be much compared to China, but as a powerful department with significant weight for their country's security and interests, S.H.I.E.L.D. should also be able to get some from it. "Don't be like this, Liang Yue. You should know that we at S.H.I.E.L.D. have always been committed to maintaining the safety and peace of the world, and have made many contributions and sacrificed many people for it. Moreover, some of our related actions have also been authorized by the World Security Council, and we need to accept their supervision in the process." Hearing this, Nick Fury immediately defended. "But you are indeed an organization affiliated with the United States of America, on the payroll. The reason why you can obtain law enforcement power within the world relies on the power and influence of the United States, just like your military forces, and the CIA or something. They will invade around the world, set up various military bases, and intelligence gathering stations. The only difference between S.H.I.E.L.D. and them is the field they are responsible for, and the difference in authority." Turning his head to look at Nick Fury, who had a dark face at the moment and wanted to say something but couldn't come up with convincing evidence, Liang Yue suddenly found it a little funny, and then continued, "So, as an important power agency of the United States of America, you should also enjoy equal benefits in your own country. Betty has already obtained 100 extra places for you. I think you should try to fight for it among them, instead of coming to me to ask for more. I believe that, based on the contributions that S.H.I.E.L.D. has made to world peace over the years, we should be able to receive some extra support." Saying this, the black director seemed to have entered a state of self-hypnosis, dropped his face, and entered the role of a politician, wanting to reason with him. "Compared to your other violent institutions in the United States, S.H.I.E.L.D. has no special characteristics, but the field of expertise and responsibility are different. As for the so-called maintenance of world peace, I think you should know how much water there is in it. This world is diverse, and there is more than one standard for judgment. I am very disgusted with your mentality of thinking that you can make decisions for the people of the world, and the position of thinking that you can represent and lead the world's extraordinary forces. In fact, you only represent the position of the United States." After saying this, Liang Yue once again shifted his gaze to the magnificent night scene outside the window. Chapter 891 Birds of a Feather. The conversation naturally ended on an unhappy note. After all, Nick Fury came to him simply relying on his self-righteousness and S.H.I.E.L.D's usual maverick style, trying to bargain with him and attempting to squeeze a few more spots from him in addition to the 100 slots. The number of slots was even just symbolic. The important thing was to get him to open a back door outside the rules. This symbolic meaning, how could Liang Yue let him have his way, if you were still in the stage of being an exchange student a few years ago, having just arrived in the United States, with shallow strength, status, and perspectives on everything? Perhaps he would have reached some cooperative relationship with S.H.I.E.L.D. However, with Liang Yue's continuous growth, the transformation in his strength and realm was only one aspect. The key was that his perspective on things, the way he thought about problems, and even the breadth and depth of information he received had long changed. These changes allowed him to view and handle everything around him from a more objective and realistic perspective. Although, in this process, it is inevitable that some personal preferences will affect his way of doing things, it is actually not far off. It was precisely because of these changes that he, imperceptibly, had a significant shift in his view of Nick Fury, S.H.I.E.L.D., and even the so-called Avengers Alliance. Simply put, compared to the Guardians of Earth, Liang Yue at this time was actually more willing to use the somewhat derogatory term outlaws to describe that group of people. One of the reasons for this result was the Avengers' ubiquitous extraterritoriality, but the more important reason was actually the old woman's laissez-faire attitude and fundamental irresponsibility. For example, the Battle of New York. According to the original plot, in this battle to defend the financial capital of the world, the old woman's violent organs never appeared from beginning to end. Apart from a small group of police officers belonging to the New York Police Department wielding small-bore standard weapons and acting on their own, there were only those few Avengers running around, flying all over the place in a busy mess. Afterwards, seeing that it was impossible to win, they even wanted to launch a nuclear bomb directly, wiping the entire city of New York off the face of the earth. They were so ruthless to their own domestic cities and citizens, let alone other countries on earth, engaging in all kinds of robbing money, robbing food, robbing people, robbing resources, establishing military bases, infectious disease storage centers, stealing oil, and as a direct organization belonging to the country of America, S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers were actually not much better, constantly flying around in aerial carriers, smashing, looting, and burning everywhere. The specific steps were, the Avengers were responsible for smashing, looting, and burning, and S.H.I.E.L.D. was responsible for robbing. After all, those mysterious side collections from various civilizations in the world in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s storage vaults did not appear there out of thin air. Look at their style of doing things, it's exactly the same as the military, the CIA, and other overt organizations, and their reputation is righteous enough. It was only in the later stages that S.H.I.E.L.D. collapsed because of Captain America's momentary willfulness, and Nick Fury, seeing that the situation was over, then went underground and continued to cause trouble. Otherwise, Black Panther and his Wakanda kingdom, which had disclosed their technology to the entire world, would probably have become this organization's subordinates, vassals, and even logistical reserve base. And relying on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s early and exceptionally deep accumulation, various secret bases, secret forces, material reserves, resource occupation, etc. Even if they lost the name of S.H.I.E.L.D., it would not be difficult to make a comeback later. Tell me, how could Liang Yue directly open a back door for the head of such an organization just because he came to chat with him? The Avengers, looking glamorous and fighting this and that everywhere on weekdays, are actually not much different from elite special agents for the most part. Captain America, a human who relies on flying a shield to fight crime and extremists, his real combat ability is not even as good as Falcon with complete equipment. Then Hawkeye, Agent Natasha, Agent Stark, his own actual combat power is approximately equal to an ordinary fitness enthusiast, basically relying entirely on a set of technological armor to fight, but the technological content of the armor is just so. War Machine Rhodes, an elite soldier, a set of primary armor plus individual war firepower, his combat ability is still passable. Black Panther, a set of vibranium armor and a wrongly chosen technology tree, basically relies on claws and fists for combat, approximately equal to 1.5. Captain America's Thor, an alien prince, comes over to assist when he is in a good mood, and cannot be seen at all when he is in a bad mood, and S.H.I.E.L.D. cannot control him. Hulk, this guy is an unstable factor at this stage. As for Captain Marvel, the Witch, Doctor Strange, etc., they have not yet appeared at this time. By the time they appear, S.H.I.E.L.D. will have almost collapsed. Moreover, the world in front of him is not a simple Marvel, but an American comic hodgepodge, not to mention the distant ones. Just the Transformers and monsters from Pacific Rim that have already appeared are not something ordinary Avengers can resist. Even the powerful combat forces among the Avengers, such as letting the Hulk fight a giant monster over 100 meters tall. The final result may be that the Hulk wins, but the price paid before destroying the monster will definitely be quite heavy. Not to mention the Transformers, they are a mechanical race with a scale and establishment, relying on characters like Steve and Hawkeye. They simply cannot compete with them. Fortunately, the American military saw enough benefits in this group of robots and took over the task. But even so, If it weren't for the brain-dead Optimus Prime, Earth would have been a Cybertronian colony long ago. The true reliable guardian force for Earth must be the military. However, the monolithic American military is definitely not good, and Liang Yue is not brain-dead enough to use the black technology around him to arm the old woman. The Extraordinary Academy plan is one of his attempts, but the plan itself is not actually important. This first batch of students recruited from China and even around the world will definitely receive key training in the future, but the growth goal of this group of people is not an army, but an elite special operations force similar to the Avengers. The 50,000 Earth Expeditionary Force that came with the Extraordinary Academy plan is the focus among these people. In addition to part of scientific researchers and special groups mixed into play, foreseeably, most of them will be in-service military personnel and professional observers from various countries. Also a ratio of 9:1, China is the absolute main body, but compared to the Extraordinary Academy plan with only about 3,000 people, the number of this group called the Expeditionary Force, which is actually explorers, is as high as 50,000, being in the current Xianlin star, such a world full of spiritual energy and magic. In addition to daily observation, research, and exploration tasks, they will naturally not be stupid enough to waste this opportunity to contact the extraordinary world. Among these people, there will inevitably be many people who are themselves in the ranks of the extraordinary group, especially like China's Buddhist and Taoist systems, Britain's wizarding magic system, and other groups that can continue to become stronger with cultivation like Captain America, ability users, and gene mutants, extraordinary individuals who suddenly acquire abnormal abilities due to certain factors. Although their own abilities may not be weak, Xianlin Star is not suitable for them. Chapter 892 Tree of Life. Oh, you're here too? Interested in the Tree of Life? After closing the door and returning to the balcony on the second floor, Liang Yue inadvertently noticed another figure in the room. This person wore a simple white robe, tall and elegant, with black hair cascading down, and a delicate golden gemstone tiara on their forehead. Their fair, jade-like skin radiated a dreamy, soft glow. It was none other than the elf princess Arwen, who had been training with the main group in the mortal world. Compared to Liang Yue and the others, Arwen's existence was unique. As a member of the elven race, like the giant eagle Rachel from the Hobbit world, she seemed somewhat out of place with the rest of the team, both in the early stages of cultivation and even now. Due to her race, fortunately, Liang Yue's mother had once gifted them a magical tome, which solved their immediate problem. Based on this, Arwen and Rachel also began to follow in the footsteps of Liang Yue and the others, gradually developing a cultivation path focused on magic, based on their own actual situations. Later, although the group also borrowed many magic cultivation books from the library of the New York Sanctum, they still mainly relied on the magical tome left by Liang Yue's mother. The magic books and the New York Sanctum, although seemingly comprehensive and containing many secrets of magic cultivation, did not contain any techniques that could elevate one's life level, for some unknown reason. In short, the magic cultivation secrets there were basically books on using spells and increasing knowledge reserves. Cultivating them could allow one to unleash powerful magic. The profound ones even touched upon the rules of the universe. However, the primary methods for accumulating magic power, advancing in realm, and sublimating one's own life level, which are fundamental to cultivation, were completely absent. The people in the magic sanctum didn't seem to value magic power cultivation very much. They basically relied on borrowing from the universe and various dimensions, making immediate deployments, and then casting spells. This was probably related to the philosophy of their organization. Just as Baron Mordo said in the movie, the Earth sorcerer community exists not only to protect the Earth from invasion by monsters from other dimensions and alternate timelines, but also to maintain the balance of the Earth. As for the sorcerer's own life levels, they didn't seem to care. To be precise, they didn't value their own bodies, but saw transcendence in the soul. The Ancient One was the longest-lived member of this organization, living for over 700 years in the original storyline, but the reason she was able to live so long was not because her own life level was high, but because she frequently borrowed high-quality magic power from different dimensions, passively maintaining the vitality of her body. The same was true for the soul. At most, it was about passively nourishing it with magic power, and the process of self-purification during the learning of magic operation and rule operation. Okay, let's get back to the topic. The books in the Supreme Magic Sanctum were basically about the principles and knowledge of various magic spells, but they did not involve the realm sublimation of the cultivators themselves. Therefore, for Arwen and Rachel, most of the cultivation matters still had to rely on themselves. Fortunately, after cultivating to a certain stage, The various systems basically showed a convergence of paths later, after Liang Yue summarized a set of rune cultivation paths based on the various talismans collected from the DC world. The two alien races were completely freed from their constraints and began the path of dual cultivation of magic and runes. However, magic was still Arwen and Rachel's primary cultivation system. The Tree of Life, which can autonomously generate magic power and release magical elements, is undoubtedly very important to them, just like when Liang Yue obtained the sapling of the world tree in the Evangelion world. After a period of research, he was able to create a green sapling dedicated to converting the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the same way. Moreover, in this process, his understanding of the operation and generation principles of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was also greatly improved. It was not difficult to understand why Arwen would be interested in this Tree of Life at this time. In addition, in the current Marvel world, the Tree of Life is also the source of the elven race, containing the secrets of the elves lives. Although Arwen is not an elf from this world, but originated from the creation god of her original plane, the mysteries of life will naturally arouse other people's desire to explore in your world. Can every sapling of the Tree of Life grow into an ancient Tree of Life? Hearing Liang Yue's words, Arwen did not answer, but curved her lips into a smile and stretched out her fair palm, then asked Singus. Liang Yue waved his sleeve and took out the remaining sapling of the Tree of Life, which was temporarily stored in his Shinyanto, and handed it to the other party. I'm not sure. The information given at the auction before was not comprehensive. Even the marked ones may not be completely credible. The elves in this world have obviously kept something back. I feel that the will in that Tree of Life seems to have fallen into deep sleep. Arwen nodded lightly upon hearing this, and after putting away the sapling, she looked at the towering tree in the distance, which stood like a majestic giant mountain in the night, including the Tree of Life when it was still in the sapling state. In the will of the Tree of Life, which had not experienced the growth process in between after being ripened by Liang Yue, was obviously not sound. However, at this moment, in Liang Yue's sight, this will in the core of the Tree of Life's tree body is already different from the past. Only half a year apart, it has quickly condensed its own soul body. And it is already quite powerful, but it is still in a sleeping state. The external appearance of this soul body is a translucent, light green color full of vitality. Like breathing, it is undergoing unconscious bulging and contraction. In the process, it is constantly drawing nutrients from the tree body, consolidating and sublimating itself. It is worth mentioning that the Tree of Life species also has its own set of operating systems for absorbing energy from the outside world, replenishing itself, and then feeding back to the surrounding world the energy it needs. In the process of growing is not generated out of thin air high in the night sky. The dense, overlapping, lush, and canopy-like countless emerald green leaves that cover the vast surrounding area, like brilliant luminous bodies, are now working hard to absorb the light source from the universe and various energy substances. This process is very gentle. At this moment, countless green leaves are naturally and instinctively absorbing various light sources, radiation, dark matter energy, etc. from outside the atmosphere while integrating into itself and transforming nutrients. It will not have any adverse effects on the surrounding life forms. The magic power and elemental power generated by the operation will instead promote their evolution. Even the waste remaining at the very end of this operating system will transform the large area within the scope of its roots into the most fertile soil. Therefore, although this Tree of Life may not be comparable to the world tree in terms of species level, it can still be called a top-level natural treasure. Chapter 893 Star Ring. After obtaining the sapling of the Tree of Life, Alwyn did not leave immediately but chose to wander around the Fairywood Star, with Elizabeth and Betty accompanying her. These three sisters were like a beautiful scenery, attracting attention wherever they went, especially Alwyn, as an elf princess, although possessing the characteristics of the elven race, such as long ears and glowing skin. She naturally had a face almost identical to Betty's with the same tall figure and delicate features, but shaped by their own experiences. The two walking together were truly unique in their own way. At first sight, old Ross was almost dazzled, however, compared to the leisure of Elizabeth and others. And the group of travelers touring around in the sky bus provided by Xia Wu, enjoying the alien time. Liang Yue was doing serious business at this time, but it wasn't a big deal. Just that with the approaching implementation time of the Extraordinary Academy plan, and the increasing number of interpersonal activities on Fairywood Star correspondingly, some basic infrastructure and guarantees should now be on the agenda. In the next period of time, more than 50,000 people will cross the interstellar space gate and come here from Earth, if we also count some scientific research organizations that did not include in the official plan before, but obtained the qualification of the inspection group from Liang Yue through the relations of various countries. then the permanent residents of Fairywood Star and all kinds of people engaged in daily activities will reach a scale of about 60,000. This is only the first batch of landing personnel in the plan. If everything goes well, there will be more people coming across the domain later, and the number of people in each phase may not be less than 50,000. With so many permanent residents and people communicating, it is obviously impossible to meet the daily needs of this scale of people by hunting and gathering alone, although Liang Yue's small city farm on the other side of the interstellar portal is enough to supply the needs here. And the countries of the Earth are probably very willing to provide sufficient material security for the life of Fairywood Star, but this is obviously not in line with the positioning and expectations of Liang Yue and the countries of the Earth for this fresh life planet. Although there was nothing explicitly written in the previous plan, the governments of the countries on Earth obviously wanted to build Fairywood Star into a second home suitable for human habitation, even if this goal is impossible in the short term for various reasons. At least they should work towards this direction, and Liang Yue, although he does not intend to build his private planet into the second common home of mankind, he still welcomes the goal of building several large-scale population gathering places, even cities, on Fairywood Star. Therefore, the current daily needs of only tens of thousands of people, such as food, clothing, and use, are best to take the route of self-sufficiency. In short, if you want to eat meat, then raise it yourself. If you want to eat vegetables, flour and rice, then cultivate and sow yourself. Anyway, various resources are very rich on the current Fairywood Star. After screening various animals and plants, find those with breeding and planting potential and focus on cultivating them. Although it is impossible to achieve the scale, refinement, and industrialization of pigs, cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, geese, wheat, rice, potatoes, etc. on Earth in a short period of time, it will also take a long time to tame those animals and plants in the wilderness environment. But if the breeding and planting sites are larger and managed extensively, these will not be a problem. In addition, in order to prevent the occurrence of situations similar to acclimatization, it is obviously necessary to appropriately introduce a batch of various cattle and sheep livestock that have been domesticated, as well as seeds of various crops from the Earth. In addition to this, housing, drinking water, travel, smelting, scientific research, industrialization, and other fields that are as important as eating are also in urgent need of solution. Previously, the several exploration teams and scientific research teams from various countries that came through the interstellar portal were basically simple and convenient in all these aspects, eating the food provided by Liang Yue's farm, living in the houses built by Liang Yue at will, and having to live in temporary tents when conducting long-distance field investigations, and various research tools were mostly brought by themselves. It is worth mentioning that Liang Yue did not provide any means of transportation for these scientific research and observation teams. That is to say, those who came before could not ride in the Airbus, or even personal Gundams, and wander around the planet like this group of people who came to travel with them. The most advanced tools in the hands of these scientific research teams are nothing more than various portable computers connected to the global network established by the intelligent brain Xiao Wu on Fairywood Star, and it's still the kind of Jurassic, inclined to light magic. Fortunately, Liang Yue had previously divided the danger levels of various species on Fairywood Star and allocated relatively fixed activity areas. The large plain area where the Tree of Life grows is equivalent to the safe zone for humans on Earth. However, even if it is a novice village where humans come across the domain, this area is still not small, and the area is comparable to the North American Great Plains on Earth. The internal survival and activities are basically small animals, herbivores, and dinosaurs, beasts, insects, etc. that are not very aggressive operating in this area, except for the sudden evolution and mutation of certain species under the nourishment of the spiritual energy and magic elements of the world. The safety problem should not be a big problem. In terms of meat, some cattle, sheep, horses, chickens, ducks, fish and other livestock will be introduced again, and vegetables and melons will also be needed, but the varieties in my farm will not be introduced. Just bring a batch over. Then what about various processing factories? According to the previous plan, plastic-type products and daily necessities are not allowed to be used on Fairywood Star, so some woodworking processing equipment, glass utensils, pottery, porcelain production lines, etc., should always be introduced. Right, of course, these must be available. After all, it is related to the daily life needs of tens of thousands of people. Even if a settlement is built from scratch, it certainly cannot start from cutting trees and burning pottery than living production lines under the current human industrial level, except for plastic products, come with some of everything. It doesn't need to be too comprehensive. My plan for Fairywood Star is not to replicate an Earth, but to build a world where modernity and magic coexist on the basis of the spiritual energy and elemental magic of the world. There can be modern technology here, but it must be integrated with magic, so just select some necessary basic industrial equipment. If you really want to talk about high technology, can the Earth side compare with Xiao Wu? Speaking, Liang Yue subconsciously looked at the sky at this time. Liang Xiaoyu, Tina, Mirava, Guna, and Princess Yuri from Wakanda also looked at the sky at the same time. I saw that outside the atmosphere of Fairywood Star at this time, a huge orange metal ring visible to the naked eye was lying across the sky. This ring looks like a white ammunition chain from a distance, with a rough style, surrounding the entire Fairywood Star, and slowly rotating non-stop. The internal structure is extremely precise. Even if you stand on the planet and watch it, you can see many complex structures in it if the weather is good, like ants, countless robots, small spaceships, etc. are clinging to it and working non-stop. This is the planetary defense weapon, Star Ring, that Liang Yue instructed the intelligent brain Xiao Wu to build when he first came to Fairywood Star. Chapter 894 Interstellar Wilderness Exploration. To construct such a massive engineering project capable of encircling an entire planet and encompassing its defense is naturally no easy task. Leaving aside the technological complexities, the sheer scale alone would likely exhaust all the shallow metal ore deposits on the planet, and even that might not be enough. Only civilizations with mature interstellar travel and construction capabilities could undertake such a project in just over half a year. Under the guidance and strategic control of the AI Xiao, the Star Ring is now taking shape. The basic framework is essentially complete, and the remaining internal construction is proceeding in an orderly manner according to Xiao's plan. In at most another month or so, the Star Ring defense line, a major component of Xianlin Star's near-star defense system, will be able to complete its final touches. In addition, the construction and establishment of various defensive measures in the surrounding space of Xianlin Star, satellites, and within the star system are also underway. By then, the entire star system's defense system will be further improved. Besides constructing these interstellar defense measures, the AI Xiao hasn't chosen to remain solely on the defensive. Instead, it's simultaneously focusing on internal fortification and external exploration. Since half a year ago, it has dispatched numerous exploration ships and intelligent robots towards the surrounding star regions, building as it goes. Just like when Liang Yue led Stark and his group on their first space voyage, they conducted interstellar exploration while deploying pre-prepared interstellar signal towers along the way, establishing their own communication network leveraging the star chart Liang Yue obtained from Xander, as well as the nomadic journey map found in the remains of the Transformers. The AI Xiao quickly established a communication system and simple monitoring and early warning facilities in the star region surrounding their own star system. Furthermore, Xianlin Star's geographical location is at the junction of the Milky Way's interstellar civilization exchange zone and the barbaric star regions. The so-called barbaric star regions don't mean there are no civilizations, but rather refer to regions that are remote, not valued by the civilized world, or star regions that have not yet been explored. These regions may still contain certain civilizations, even advanced interstellar civilizations, however, possibly due to racial characteristics or cultural habits. They rarely interact with civilizations that have developed commercial and cultural exchanges, but it's not as if there's no interaction at all. For example, the Xianlin Star that Liang Yue auctioned off may very well have been personally sent to the auction by a clumsy civilization from the barbaric star regions when their own civilization reaches a certain stage of development. What these civilizations pursue may no longer be continued technological upgrades or the pursuit of racial evolution, but rather, due to the foundation of their own culture, they head straight towards certain metaphysical directions. They have relatively advanced biotechnology and mature interstellar navigation capabilities. But this civilization is not easy to interact with, prefers to be independent, and is keen on conducting biological experiments in some of the Milky Way's barbaric star regions. However, because this civilization's reach has not continued to extend outward for a long time, always staying within its own territory, and its daily actions are low-key enough unless attacked, they almost never proactively engage in profit disputes or wars for supremacy with other civilizations, so they were no longer valued by advanced civilizations in the Milky Way such as Xander. Anyway, the Milky Way is vast, and there are still large areas of unexplored wilderness. At this stage, it is enough to accommodate these interstellar civilizations to act recklessly without restraint. In short, being situated in the frontier region between the civilized star region and the barbaric zone, without any conspicuous civilization constraints on the side. The AI Xiaoyu naturally wouldn't waste such a superior geographical location. It also scattered a batch of exploration ships towards the barbaric star regions. So far, Xiaoyu has quietly found more than a dozen life-bearing planets in these edges of the galaxy. Among them, the planets that have given birth to intelligent races are temporarily skipped over because Liang Yue had set an exploration principle in advance: try not to disturb or plunder planets with native intelligent life, and focus on observation. But besides that, there are still as many as 8 life-bearing planets that are completely in the wilderness stage. Moreover, although most of these planets have more or less discovered traces of humans, relics, or even the existence of residual alien laboratories, they do not actually belong to any specific force in the Milky Way. No civilization has ever stood up to declare sovereignty over these 8 planets. That is to say, in addition to Xianlin Star, these 8 life-bearing planets have now automatically been assigned to his Liang Yue. At least, that's how the AI Xiao understands it. Therefore, after confirming that there is no native intelligent life on these life-bearing planets, Xiao almost immediately cleaned up the planets themselves, eliminating some hidden dangers, such as the nanometer-scale superbiological virus storage on Xianlin Star. Before then, it quickly used these 8 life-bearing planets as strongholds, and began to establish corresponding local defense forces, military-industrial bases, and other facilities to ensure the substantive occupation of the planet in its star system. The construction progress is naturally much slower than on Xianlin Star, but it is still gratifying at this moment. The AI Xiaoyu has established a complete communication network system and corresponding interstellar grid engineering between these 9 life-bearing planets. Now that Liang Yue is on Xianlin Star, he can remotely observe those planets through the AI Xiaoyu's link. Other people need to obtain certain permissions, of course. Currently Meng Xiaoyu, Aunt Liu, and others do not know about Xiaoyu's achievements in exploring the barbaric star regions during this period, including Elizabeth, Betty, and Alwyn. Although they are Liang Yue's close companions, they themselves don't have any permission issues, but so far, they don't seem to have noticed this problem. After broadly finalizing a wave of various basic technology production lines and the introduction of various categories of goods for clothing, food, housing, and transportation, Liang Yue and others immediately began to implement this work one by one. At this time, Liang Yue also rarely gathered the travelers on Xianlin Star, as well as several scientific expedition teams from various countries who had crossed the portal, for a preliminary consultation meeting. The main content of the meeting was to divide the area of the Great Plains, where the Tree of Life is located, that is, the entire safe zone, into various functional areas such as breeding and grazing areas, planting areas, commercial office areas, leisure and living areas, industrial areas, research and development areas, college areas, residential areas, and so on. As the main area for human social interaction and life on Xianlin Star in the future, the participants naturally attached great importance to this and actively spoke, had friendly discussions, and put forward their own suggestions for the construction of the safe zone. Moreover, many people felt that this matter was not small, and it would be best to bring it back to Earth, invite enough professionals to discuss it, and then talk about the implementation issue after a specific planning plan was put forward. Of course, the person who makes the final decision must be Liang Yue. Chapter 895: The Mark of Civilization. The journey wasn't over yet. Before they even left, someone on the Xianlin Star was already eagerly sending the information about the Life Tree Plane Area's planning proposal solicitation back to Earth. Originally, Liang Yue thought he could just deal with this matter casually, but he didn't expect that the various countries on Earth would take it so seriously, each one acting as if they were truly planning humanity's second home. Frankly speaking, the appearance of Xianlin Star was indeed very important and of great significance to Earth. There's no need to talk about grand topics like a second home or a second foothold outside of Earth, a place to live. Just the appearance of such a place with a complete ecosystem and a healthy food chain at all levels is a powerful supplement to Earth's increasingly fragile ecological environment. Many cross-border scientific teams' research projects are not actually about finding minerals, oil, natural gas, or even various novel mineral deposits or elements that could promote and supplement Earth's social science research system. In the eyes of those real scientists, a piece of unpolluted soil, a nest of insects at the bottom of the food chain on Xianlin Star, may be much more important than the resources urgently needed by Earth's industrial society. Of course, various primitive plants, dinosaurs, mammals, fish, etc., from the late Jurassic period are also important subjects for their research and investigation. Heaven and Earth, spiritual energy, magic elements, magic power, and other basic energies that constitute a mysterious side of the world are naturally the most popular research directions for these teams. In short, the appearance of such a fresh and pure wildland is absolutely fatal for researchers in related fields, and many people are trying to pour into Xianlin Star. Similarly, many countries want to leave their mark on this hot land at the beginning of its development. Just half a day later, some planning proposals based on countries had already been sent to him through the wrist computer that Liang Yue had sent out before, as well as various official channels, so proactive, inside the academy area of the small town farm, which Liang Yue had expanded separately. Liang Yue was sitting under a large tree near the lake with Meng Xianwu, Guna, Sister Lu Yao, Stark, Su Rui, and others, checking the design proposals that had been sent in through a holographic light screen display as one of the few communication channels that Liang Yue had publicly announced to the outside world so far. The portal website of the small town farm had already uploaded a series of complete global atlases of Xianlin Star's terrain and landforms, as well as accurate virtual model resources. Among them, of course, was also the life tree plane area, which was the main body of this design, as well as the terrain and resource distribution around the plane. Of course, various intelligence information about Xianlin Star itself is still classified for the time being and is not suitable for public disclosure to ordinary people. If you want to check this information on the website, you need corresponding permissions. However, this is obviously not a problem for official organizations of various countries at this time. The design proposals sent by teams from various countries were made on the basis of these semi-public maps and virtual models. Various resource condition information is almost clear at a glance. Therefore, the planning proposals they sent are basically the same, and the biggest difference is in the architectural style. Then, in connection with the climate zone, temperature and humidity conditions, wind level, and other factors of this plain area on Xianlin Star, some unsuitable building structures, such as tropical thatched house schemes, or overly flamboyant skyscrapers in the wild world, were almost eliminated at a glance, after excluding a few that were obviously copied from the style of other civilizations. So, after a few minutes, only a few dozen design submissions were left, all of which were plans that everyone present had no major disagreements or incongruities with. These included a Chinese classical style urban architectural style, Western rural and imitation ancient building complexes, and a gamified fantasy architectural style. Of these two mainstream styles, these four design proposals passed the initial test of everyone present, and it can also be seen invisibly that the mainstream trend of the current development of Earth civilization and society is then the rest is a surrealist sub-era design proposal. The architectural style is unconstrained and not very practical, but it is really beautiful, like building a pile of jewelry more than building a plan that draws on the style of the habitats of various magical races. In magical literature, Liang Yue saw at least the hobbit's home, the elf's treehouse, the human castle, etc. It fits well with the theme of the giant life tree in the center of the plane. The last design proposal was provided by Su Rui and their Wakanda kingdom. As an aside, as the Princess of Wakanda, Su Rui has already taken the official quota of the country's extraordinary academy after the end of the trip, and seamlessly joined the preschool class of the academy in the small town farm. In the evaluation of the talent detector, this woman's spiritual talent is as high as 18 points, the same as Liang Yue back then. However, compared to someone's lack of interest in personal affairs, Su Rui has already made considerable achievements in the field of scientific research in her own country. As for the 10 research student places that Wakanda smashed out with vibranium, they have not been used yet. The design proposal they sent over, although different from the two major cultural trends of the East and the West, has a strong natural beauty originating from the African region. Moreover, the buildings in this plan are not pure natural ancient styles. They also mix a large number of modern technological architectural styles, or rather, the main body is modern technological architecture, supplemented by various African natural elements. It has the fashion, simplicity and neatness of modern style, and also has the mysterious African cultural characteristics. Animals, trees, nature worship, technology and nature are perfectly blended together, and the style is very harmonious. Obviously, the Wakanda kingdom in the current world is not an unflowered primitive tribe. They have their own set of civilization development systems, unknown, but consistent. Unfortunately, Liang Yue did not adopt any of these plans in the end. Instead, while retaining the functional area division structure, he directly asked the intelligent brain Xiao Wu to redesign one on the spot with a Chinese style as the main body. It basically put on the shell of an ancient architectural city found in the mortal world, and then left more than a dozen satellite town areas outside the city for other interested teams to improvise. This result naturally caused everyone present to roll their eyes wildly. Chapter 896 Chapter 900. With the design scheme finalized, the official construction work naturally followed, though Liang Yue didn't need to worry about these matters soon. Under the arrangement of the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu, teams of intelligent robots, numbering in the tens of thousands, began to enter the site in a mighty and organized fashion, driving various specialized machines and starting work simultaneously in different designated areas according to the plans on the construction blueprints: intelligent gravity soil compactors, anti-gravity transport platforms, precision traction operation platforms, nanoscale 3D printers, and the accompanying holographic intelligent model building system. With the assistance of various black technology construction machines, the progress of the project was naturally rapid. Although it couldn't be described as 1,000 miles a day and couldn't compare to a great cultivator like Liang Yue, who could directly raise finished buildings from the earth, it excelled in overall control and intelligent coordination. Every architectural detail, every building material component standard, and the precision of interlocking structures on all the blueprints were optimized to the best possible level under the powerful calculations of the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu. And the building materials used in this process, although they looked diverse, gold, silver, copper, iron, wood, stone, etc., with thousands of differences, were actually all arranged and combined by Xiao Wu using tiny metal alloy elements through biomimicry principles and ultra-precision printers. Various wooden beams, pillars, window frames replicated with metal elements and atoms, and bluestone, marble, and white jade of imitation stone structures, with intricate and delicate textures, basically achieved a level of realism that could fool the eye. However, these high-tech building materials created through such means, although they looked no different from ordinary stone or wood, had completely different fundamental attributes. Their strength was far superior to the original materials by hundreds or thousands of times, and they were also fireproof, electric-proof, waterproof, shockproof, puncture-proof, and chop-proof. In addition, for the main urban area of the main building complex, although Liang Yue only intended to use a template to deal with it simply, the template itself was not ordinary after all. The urban building complex model that this guy chose came from the mortal Great World as a mature and stable cultivation Great World, although the scope of Liang Yue's selection was limited to the mortal continent, where the highest cultivation level was only in the middle and late stages of the transformation god stage, and where small probability events such as demon invasions had occurred during the development process, but the civilization history there had lasted for tens of thousands of years, or even longer. During the process, the human race was the absolute protagonist of the mortal continent, and the invisible cultural atmosphere was exceptionally rich. The urban structure born under such a cultivation civilization must be exceptionally refined. What's even more gratifying is that the overall architectural style of the mortal world is very similar to the classical Chinese style. However, compared to China on Earth, their development history is even longer and more ancient. Absolutely worthy of the evaluation of being vast as the ocean and continuous. Under this atmosphere and environment, the classical architectural style and artistic level in the mortal world are naturally higher than those in China. These urban building models were all recorded by Xiao Wu's avatars on Jingxiang Teacher, Yazi Sr., Xia Ozio, Baoyan, and others during their travels and experiences in the mortal world, covering the north and south, and various large and small countries. The number is vast. Therefore, although these building complexes all belong to the classical Chinese style, due to the differences in their respective geographical environments, the styles are also very different. Some are exquisite and unparalleled, with a strong humanistic atmosphere, some are rough and bold, with a majestic momentum, and some have unique local characteristics and mysterious colors. Therefore, when choosing a template, Meng Xiaoyu, Guna, Stark, and others around Liang Yue inevitably became a little dazzled in the end. It took a full 3 days to barely reach a consensus on Xiao Wu's collection of architectural models. Great Jin Imperial City, this was everyone's final choice, as the most powerful and historically the most distant empire in the mortal continent. The capital of this cultivation dynasty may not necessarily have the strongest military strength. After all, the ancestors of various sects are hiding in secret places to practice in seclusion, or they are traveling in the human world in some corner. But if it is said that the capital of the Great Jin dynasty is the most culturally prosperous place in the world, then there should be no problem. There will be no emperors or royals on Xianlin Star, that's for sure. And the erased Imperial City area was directly replaced by the Tree of Life, and the area occupied by this area was also expanded a lot. After all, the volume of the Tree of Life is already large, with a height of several thousand meters alone, and the surrounding root system directly covers an area of tens of thousands of meters if you add the future growth potential of this giant tree, as well as the natural landscapes such as forests and lakes reserved around the Tree of Life. Therefore, on Xiao Wu's architectural plan, the central area of this main urban building complex, with the Tree of Life as the core of the original landscape, the forest area, is actually as large as 100 miles. The outer building complex part is arched in a radial shape closer to the periphery. Liang Yue specially left areas for other Earth countries and interested contractors to develop freely. Frankly speaking, ordinary national units may not be able to afford a construction project of this scale even if China were to come, without considering the cost in investing massive manpower and material resources. The construction period would have to be counted in years. It's just Liang Yue. After the civilization level climbed to the interstellar level, relying on the intelligent AI, Xiao Wu's various black technologies and robot arms, he was able to have enough resources and spare time to build such a large building complex for his own entertainment. However, when this guy uploaded the holographic construction model of this project to his own portal website, it still scared many people. Those national level teams who were originally eager to try and had not had time to submit their proposals, after seeing this engineering plan, suddenly became silent. One by one, they were silent and speechless, but this was obviously not enough to make them give up. After realizing that there was no hope of coveting the planning scheme of the main building complex, these teams turned their attention to those reserved projects on the outskirts of the city anyway. These places were originally left by Liang Yue for them to develop freely. One day, a clear morning, the rarely idle Liang Yue was walking alone in the orchard of his own farm, accompanied only by the panda, Dun Dun. Among the surrounding treetops and green leaves, several brightly colored parrots were hiding quietly, and the bird eyes that looked over, more or less, carried a bit of curiosity and awe. However, this awe was not directed at Liang Yue, but at Dun Dun beside him as a veritable divine beast-level species. This little guy inherently carries a kind of majesty from higher-level magical beasts. In addition, since he was born with a summoning treasure book, Liang Yue did not deliberately level him up. As a result, the current light and dark holy bear Dun Dun is still in the juvenile state, and his ability to restrain his own aura is naturally not as good as Liang Yue, the great cultivator. As for the Yingyi and Yanayan, who have always been around this guy, they have now crossed the interstellar portal again and ran to the construction site on Xianlin Star to watch the excitement. In fact, it's not just them. Many scientific research teams who are inspecting there have also temporarily put down the professional tasks and gathered around the construction site to observe for no other reason. The intelligent robot construction site controlled by Xiao Wu is too shocking. The scale of tens of thousands of people starting work together doesn't sound like much, but if you add the sky covering, almost countless spaceships and black technology construction machines, that scene is complex but orderly, noisy, and thousands of ships move together, but they don't hinder each other at all. There's nothing more shocking than watching a magnificent and elegant building complex take shape in front of your eyes in just a few days. In addition, the various ultra-era construction machines that appear during this construction process are naturally also the main targets of observation. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 897 Comet Strikes. Russell. Just as Liang Yue was leading the panda Dun Dun out of the dense orchard, about to step across a bluestone-paved path to the opposite pasture area, a violent scraping sound suddenly came from the fruitful woods behind him. As the sound approached, the parrots on the nearby branches were immediately startled, flapping their colorful wings and flying away. At this time, the season on Earth was autumn, just entering October, and the originally lush green leaves on the fruit trees had unknowingly turned red, orange, and golden yellow together with the fruits that had not yet been picked. The colors were bright and varied, like a colorful painting, and a tempting fruity fragrance wafted faintly. A few seconds later, a figure in camouflage uniform suddenly jumped out from the thick branches of the fruit tree, and then the whole person gracefully did a somersault in the air, steadily standing not far from Liang Yue. The person who came was a military officer who was quite familiar to him, the deputy commander of the elite soldiers stationed in his small town farm, surnamed Wen, in his 30s, young and strong, and they often met each other and had a lot of dealings. The lightest skill he had used before when traversing and leaping between the tree trunks was actually the one Liang Yue had taught to his preschool members a few days ago for practice. He didn't forbid others from learning it, so now, It has become a daily compulsory course for a group of old professors, graduate students, soldiers on duty, some farm employees, and even those monks and Taoists in his farm. After work. That said, although this is a lightness skill, in addition to lightness, its greatest function is to strengthen the body, nourish qi and blood, and it can be practiced by both the elderly and children, with extremely high versatility. Although there is nothing too profound involved in inner cultivation techniques, after practicing to a certain level, it will also be like those more systematic external martial arts in the martial arts world. Reaching a state of internal energy generated from the outside and practicing it together with a breathing method that comes with this lightness skill, after a period of time, can naturally make people develop a kind of internal force that has no extreme characteristics and is neutral and peaceful in attributes. Of course, it is not easy to rely on this lightness method to achieve the increase of internal force cultivation, and it depends on the cultivation environment. It is said that not long after this technique was taught by him, it was learned by some relevant departments, such as the military, studied for a while, and then used as a daily compulsory practice. It is impossible to keep secret a technique like this that has been widely spread. After all, this was originally the basic content that Liang Yue was going to teach in his extraordinary academy, and the enrollment range of this student is for every country in the entire earth. Back to the topic at this time. After landing, the deputy officer came to Liang Yue's side in large strides, cupped his hands, and his face was still carrying a bit of rosy complexion after exercise. Is there anything I can do for you? Liang Yue smiled gently when he saw this. Hey, NASA just announced a message, have you seen it? After coming, this officer didn't take any status or posture. Just like the usual tone of communication with friends. Except that he added the word "you" in the title message. A newly discovered comet is flying towards the Earth and will collide in about half a year with a thought. The intelligent brain Xiao Wu immediately found the detailed report of this message on the internet. Looking at the content here, Liang Yue subconsciously crossed his arms and pondered. Yes, that's the matter. Why wasn't it discovered before? It will collide after flying in the universe for 6 months. This time is not long, isn't it? Just saying. The matter came a little too suddenly, and even those old men who were flying around the world before didn't discover this matter. The old men flying around the sky in the mouth of this deputy commander are the scientists in related fields who have been renting spaceships from Liang Yue and are still doing various experiments in the universe with great enthusiasm. When returning, they also like to bring back a batch of ores and asteroids from the universe. Now, these people have been driving spaceships for quite a while, and their figures have drifted throughout the solar system. It is said that a few days ago, 2 of the spaceships have embarked on a journey outside the solar system, and I don't know if they have come back now. Is that so? Let me see. Saying that, Liang Yue unfolded the divine sense that was originally restrained in his body and probed towards the direction of the comet in the report. At the same time, Xiao Wu's avatar on his wrist also popped up a light curtain, showing a rapidly changing scene of the cosmic starry sky on it. Purely relying on his current late-stage tribulation transcending realm and the strength of his divine sense, it is obviously not easy to cross this astronomical distance to detect the comet that will hit the Earth in 6 months. However, if you add some other methods, it is not difficult to take advantage of the situation. For example, when he was traveling in the universe before, the intelligent brain Xiao Wu had already deployed some hardware equipment for detection and early warning in the solar system. Those signal towers that can cross layers of cosmic starry sky and wormholes to connect to the network signal actually also have some functions of early warning and information scanning in secret. Under the combination of the two, soon Liang Yue found the comet through Xiao Wu's hardware amplification and covered it with his own divine sense. At the same time, the picture of the comet also appeared on the light curtain in front of him. Oh, a bit of a surprise. This comet is basically composed of various rare earths. A few seconds later, the true face of this thing has been almost understood under the double investigation of Liang Yue and the intelligent brain Xiao Wu. Rare earths. The deputy commander went on the side was a little surprised when he heard this, and then his face was full of surprise, and his eyes began to shine. Originally, the reason why he came to Liang Yue was naturally to seek a solution. In fact, after renting the spaceship from Liang Yue, the relevant parties also have the ability to prevent the doomsday disaster of this extraterrestrial comet attack and the recurrence of the dinosaur crisis. Although what they're rented from Liang Yue are only small spaceships with small volumes, as long as there is a proper plan and proper operation, it is just a matter of tossing a few more times. With 6 months of time, there is enough buffer room to do extraterrestrial blasting and cutting, or to transfer them in blocks with traction rays. However, after learning about the existence of this comet and understanding that it would really hit the Earth, The relevant parties naturally had to gather think tanks and try their best to find a solution. Communicating with Liang Yue and seeking necessary help is obviously also a good choice. It's just that this deputy officer Wen, who was responsible for passing the message, shouldn't have thought beforehand that this comet, which was originally heading for the end of the world, was actually carrying such a surprise. So the best way should be to find a way to divide it and then transport it back to Earth in batches. Deputy Commander Wen touched his somewhat stubble chin at this time and said in a firm tone, "No need to be so troublesome. If you want it, I can bring it down now." Saying that, Liang Yue retracted his divine sense back into his body, calculated the spatial coordinates a little, and then opened a special door in front of him. Along with this slowly opening magic coil, a dark cosmic starry sky appeared on the opposite side of the space door. At the same time, a large rock, constantly emitting water vapor outside its circumference and stirring up visible radiation light waves, was rushing towards this side at a rapid pace. Seeing this, Liang Yue grabbed his hand forward. The posture is like taking an apple from the table, simple and unpretentious. But with his current actions, the comet on the opposite side of the door, which is rapidly becoming larger in the eyes of the two, is also surrounded by a group of gold-purple halos, and in the blink of an eye, it turns into a stream of light and is sucked into his fair palm. Chapter 898 Space Car. The methods Liang Yue used to collect these celestial bodies weren't particularly remarkable. In essence, they were just ordinary retrieval techniques from the cultivation world. It was as simple as a cultivator casually taking a magical artifact or mineral into their hand. As Liang Yue's own cultivation level continued to rise, and his understanding of spatial techniques and laws gradually deepened, these basic methods that he could use effortlessly now displayed effects that seemed heaven-defying to ordinary people. Looking at his seemingly not too large palm, a gray solid object about the size of a jujube pit was quietly floating under the aura of a purple golden light. This was the comet from before, almost entirely composed of rare earth minerals. The next moment, accompanied by a burst of flames, the comet with its uneven surface in Liang Yue's palm began to change. A portion of it turned into fly ash and was moved to the side, while another portion transformed into a strange liquid in just a few seconds. This colorful liquid rapidly divided itself into 200 or 300 pieces of varying sizes and colors, forming metallic beads, which then, under his control, transformed into rectangular shapes and cooled down. Immediately, Liang Yue gently tossed these objects in his palm onto the white interstellar spacecraft landing pad in front of his small town's farm. "I've already refined these rare earths. Don't forget to pay when you transport them away. RMB is fine, at market price." After discarding the remaining fly ash impurities into the surrounding desert, Liang Yue looked at Vice Minister Wen, who was standing beside him with a confused and shocked expression, and said, "Okay. I'll report this matter to the higher-ups later. I guarantee everything will be handled properly." Upon hearing this, Vice Minister Wen subconsciously gave someone a salute and replied loudly, "Anything else?" Liang Yue smiled slightly upon seeing this and continued to ask, "Anything else?" "The listing of the Airspace Automobile Trading subsidiary. You should already know about that. And there's been some progress in the research on the virtual world brainwave linking device. ZIOU seems to have reported this to you as well." "Alright, during the large-scale construction on Celestial Forest Star, a large batch of wood and plants were cleared out, weren't they? The country is quite interested in these things and hopes to purchase a batch." Compared to Meng ZIOU, his exclusive secretary, the vice minister when in front of him was obviously still relatively inexperienced, needing to flip through the work reports on his issued wrist computer while reciting them to him. "Oh, I agree to this matter. Just have them send a few people over to choose when the time comes." Large-scale city construction, with a construction area even covering hundreds of miles, naturally involved a considerable amount of engineering. During this process, the plants originally growing on the Great Plains, whether they were various tall primeval trees and forests, or various complex and diverse shrubs, vines, wild grasses on the plains, small flowers, mushrooms, etc., all suffered greatly as a result. A mysterious and dreamlike night scene of Celestial Forest Star, which was previously in the eyes of Liang Yue and his fellow travelers, was instantly balled over a large area. However, the artificial intelligence Xiao Wu was still quite particular when constructing, and didn't directly flatten the entire construction site with gravity compactors. Various trees, plants, grasses, fruits, and even small animals scurrying around were selectively harvested in large quantities. These things were almost equivalent to weeds for Liang Yue, but for the countries of Earth, who were wholeheartedly conducting a systematic study of Celestial Forest Star, they were a batch of research materials containing a massive amount of value at this time. Vice Minister Wen's desire to purchase was quite appropriate, of course. It couldn't be ruled out that some local tycoons with extraordinary means wanted to collect a batch of wood to take home to make furniture, wood carvings, prayer beads, and the like. As for the listing of a subsidiary under the Aerospace Automobile Company that Vice Minister Wen mentioned, Liang Yue had indeed already learned about it, and this matter was actually quite important. Simply put, this was the establishment of a new wealth reservoir. The country has accumulated a lot of wealth over the years of development, but it has also printed a lot of money, and in terms of quantity, the latter is greater than the former, so various prices have begun to rise. This is of course a normal economic development strategy, and the whole world plays like this, which is beyond reproach. But when the real wealth and the money are not equal to a certain extent, it will cause no small problems, such as rising prices. So a few excellent commodities are needed to target and store the value of these money and divert them. The United States and Britain use the stock market to store these money, but the domestic stock market is obviously not enough to support its own volume, so it uses houses. However, some time ago, the relevant industries in China have shown a downward trend, because they are saturated, the supply exceeds the demand, and they are too expensive. This reservoir can't be played anymore, so that Liang Yue even bought a large number of houses as a bottom line under the persuasion of Meng Xiaoyu. Under such circumstances, the establishment of a new reservoir has naturally become imperative because of someone's intervention. The current domestic development is still in full swing. The three major industries of medical care, aerospace, automobiles, and the virtual world can almost bring revolutionary development to mankind. It is also sufficient to undertake the task of the reservoir. However, the domestic side obviously does not intend to list these three major industries at one time. Among them, medical care is closely related to people's daily life and is high-end enough, but if it is listed as a wealth storage, it will inevitably continue to greatly increase people's spending in this area on the original basis, which is contrary to the domestic's own purpose. The virtual world industry is because the domestic scientific research strength is the leading situation, and the absorption of various aspects is slower, and it does not have too many practical conditions for the time being. However, the relevant domestic parties are obviously playing more conservatively in this operation, and they have only come up with an empty shell such as a trade subsidiary to be listed. If this were changed to the United States, with so many convenient conditions provided by Liang Yue to make a fuss, I am afraid that the US stock market would have been directly pushed to 100,000 points. After all, such a mature spacecraft that can carry out airspace flight and space navigation represents unlimited resources and benefits. After waving goodbye to Vice Minister Wen, Liang Yue continued to walk unhurriedly towards the depths of the farm with Dun Dun beside him. His destination this time was the ranching area of the small town, because in the previous daily work reports of the ranch, Liang Yue had seen more than once the ranchers' and experts' remarks and written descriptions about sporadic animals becoming refined and becoming more and more intelligent. This is also very normal. After all, the appearance of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is a rare opportunity for all things in the world previously, since examples of autonomous sublimation of plants into spiritual species could appear in their own plantation. Then the various pig, cattle, sheep, chicken, duck, goose, and other species in the ranching area, which numbered in the millions, would naturally be no exception. Moreover, the original intelligence level of certain animal species was not low, like horses, camels, parrots, etc., under the nourishment of rich spiritual energy, even if they are unlucky and cannot directly achieve the promotion of individual level. Their own intelligence level will also make significant progress as a result. These are naturally within Liang Yue's expectations. Chapter 899. The Sea Monster is Coming. Not long after, as Liang Yue and Dun Dun had just separated from the orchard and entered a specially separated breeding area, a strange, modulated, yet thought-provoking crowing sound suddenly rang out. A human and a bear looked towards the sound, and soon spotted a magnificent rooster crowing towards the sky on a sturdy tree stump that had been trimmed not far away. As the saying goes, when the rooster crows, the world turns white. This crowing sound traveled far and wide, as if piercing through the air, carrying a hint of mental deterrence, causing many of the surrounding creatures, both of the same kind and different, to stop their original actions. Some slightly dazed, it was as if this crowing sound was ringing in their minds, able to cleanse their spirits. Even the large group of experts responsible for observing couldn't avoid it. Of course, this ability didn't seem to last long, and the after effects disappeared without a trace just a few seconds after the crowing ended. Compared to its own kind, this rooster in front of them was indeed a bit strange, with a slightly long and slender neck, carrying a hint of graceful curvature. Like the neck of a peacock, its colorful feathers shone brightly in the sunlight, and the red crown on its head was as bright as blood, upright and strong. Even the tail feathers behind it were elongated, with red and orange colors stretching nearly half a meter. This rooster in front of them, as well as its surrounding counterparts and livestock that have been separated out, were originally placed here because they developed some differences from ordinary species during their growth. At most, it's only been a year or so compared to this rooster who took the lead. The other pigs, cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, geese, etc. in the field were naturally not bad either, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, like what a cow with a pair of crystal clear, jade-like, round and smooth mutated short horns, a black-skinned piglet whose large ears could almost reach the ground, a lively lamb that could easily leap over 5 or 6 meters with one kick, a donkey with shiny black and white fur all over its body, as if it came with dazzling attributes, and so on. Looking around, Liang Yue knew with a silent sweep of his divine sense that in this special breeding circle that had been deliberately created, there were as many as tens of thousands of animals with spirituality. Of course, these livestock and poultry were not living together at this time, but were raised separately in different enclosures by the on-site staff and various experts. Moreover, they had also carried out very detailed targeted divisions of responsibility at this time. Almost every animal's activity area had piles of experts, scholars, and even onlookers recording the daily routines, living habits, dynamics, and changes of each spiritual chicken, duck, cow, and sheep, just like the spiritual plants in the plant planting area, and the various substances with signs of mutation that were particularly valued by the experts. This shows the importance that relevant parties attach to this level of new things. In the past, when the true spiritual energy of heaven and earth, such a magical substance, could not be seen, the country on the surface did not seem to attach much importance to these mutated species and animals with abnormal intelligence even most of the time. They would deliberately suppress and confuse some of the concepts of such information and rumors, but since Liang Yue planted that small tree in the farm that could convert and produce a large amount of spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the relevant parties have been the most active in researching these things to some extent. The keynote of various supernatural phenomena that were previously tacitly approved to be suppressed in China has now quietly shifted, and this change in attitude has even reached a semi-public level. Therefore, this area deliberately divided by various experts in front of them seemed very lively. Many people gathered around the outer edges of each enclosure in various spiritual animal activity areas, holding various long guns, cannons, and telescopes at this moment while enthusiastically discussing and communicating. They also occasionally recorded something in notebooks or handwritten manuscripts. This was still under the condition that the number of experts was deliberately limited in order not to disturb the normal life and rest of these spiritual animals. Not far away, next to a group of white camels leisurely eating grass in a free-range posture, there were even more than a dozen religious figures with considerable strength in the local area, dressed neatly and holding books, performing rituals to the camels. Speaking of which, if Liang Yue remembered correctly, this group of white camels should not be breeding species from his own small city farm, but wild camels that ran from the nearby desert at the beginning of the farm's establishment. Later, because his side had abundant water resources and sufficient food, they secretly ran in from under the city gate as a group one night, and never left, since this thing was originally considered a sacred object in the eyes of some people. So naturally it was well taken care of by some herders recruited from the local area. Their daily activities were even unrestricted, and they were allowed to freely shuttle through this small city, living a very leisurely life, and new camels had already been born in the small group. However, under the nourishment of such a rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth in his own farm, after more than half a year, this group of white camels had not shown too much spirituality. At most their intelligence was a little higher, which seemed a bit unworthy of their reputation. However, almost all species that can be selected and kept in this area have abnormal intelligence as standard. Fortunately, Liang Yue's side has a large family in a large business, so he doesn't care about raising such a group of idlers, and treats it as the private love of the local herders. Liang Yue himself also has this kind of hobby, and the macaws flying all over the city are one of the representatives. Even when some macaws with good postures flew to his side and curiously looked at him, Liang Yue directly took action and awakened the mature intelligence of those macaws. Diddy report, Chief. There is another anomaly below the space gate in the Pacific seabed. Just 3 minutes ago, 4 monsters have crossed the space gate and are heading towards the northwest direction. That is, they are quickly swimming towards the waters where the island country is located. Their target after this appearance seems to be very clear, and compared to the previous wave of monsters, These 4 seem to have been upgraded to a certain extent. The performance data in all aspects is temporarily unknown, but only in terms of swimming speed, it has increased by at least half compared to the previous wave. If their current direction of movement remains unchanged, it is estimated that it will only take 3 or 4 hours to reach the mainland of the island country. Got it. Just as Liang Yue was browsing and shuttling between the various spiritual animal enclosures with Dun, occasionally stopping to observe for a while, when he secretly decided in his heart that he would bring these spiritual animals into the fairy forest star later and let them develop and evolve on their own. A light curtain suddenly popped out from the little Wu clone on his wrist. Appearing on the opposite side were several elite soldiers who had been ordered to stay by the panoramic sand table, waiting for orders to observe. Although the specific people have been replaced several times, their tasks have never changed, at least on the surface it is. As for the matter of the monsters crossing the space gate again and heading towards the island country, Liang Yue had naturally sensed it long ago. At this time, his divine sense was suppressed in his body, but even with the instinctive emission of his physical basic sensory functions, he could still expand the scope of investigation to the entire globe. The obvious abnormal fluctuations of the underwater space gate naturally could not escape Liang Yue's ears and eyes. Chapter 900 Login. However, Liang Yue didn't plan to interfere with this monster attack. After all, those 4 small fries weren't heading for his home. Besides, ever since the interstellar travel project and the 3-day tour of Xianlin Star concluded, that little girl, Nazi, had been staying on Earth and hadn't returned to the base world or the mortal realm. She hadn't even been able to return to the United States. It wasn't that she didn't want to, but she had been directly pulled back to Japan by that heavyweight Japanese woman who had traveled with her in recent days. Nazi had been complaining to him about this matter, saying that many forces, influential families, and even her own family in Japan were trying various ways to harass and persuade her. The goal, of course, was to use Nazi's classmate relationship with Liang Yue, as well as certain ambiguous connections, to ask him for extra spots to the extraordinary academy outside of the plan. After all, hadn't Elizabeth and Betty both succeeded before? The original quota of 1 remained unchanged, but an extra 100 spots were added outside the plan. Although they didn't know what kind of relationship their Nazi had with Liang Yue, and Nazi hadn't revealed the base world, her cultivation level, or more secrets to anyone. However, in the eyes of those Japanese dignitaries, families, and her own family, the relationships between people boiled down to just a few things, judging from some of the information that Liang Yue had revealed so far. A slight tendency towards lewdness and a sentimental nature were probably his few exposed weaknesses compared to Elizabeth, Betty, and even Guna, Tina, and others. Their Nazi was obviously not much different. They were all classmates, all people in the same small circle, and it was perfectly fine to give them each a distinctive evaluation. Now, Elizabeth and Betty had become Liang Yue's official girlfriends, and although Guna, Tina, and Mileva were a little weaker in status, they had no shortage of resources in their hands, whether it was the selection rights for interstellar travel or the massive cash flow accumulated because of this matter. It was enough to illustrate someone's personality. Now that it was Nazi's turn, there was no reason for her to be worse than others. Therefore, because of this calculation, many people in Japan had set their sights on Nazi in the past. That little girl, Nazi, rarely returned to Japan throughout the year due to studies and cultivation, only returning 2 or 3 times a year, except for occasionally and unintentionally exposing the standard black technology equipment obtained from the AI Xiao Wu to her family, resulting in requests and inquiries. She had hardly revealed any valuable information about Liang Yue, including Yamamoto Nazi herself, even though she had been recruited into the base world by Liang Yue as a native because of her classmate group to study and train. And even though the little girl's strength was now extraordinary, it was still unknown to others. In fact, not only Nazi didn't reveal it, but even Gwen, Little Spider, Sam, and Michaela didn't expose too much of their strength when they occasionally went out to act as vigilantes out of habit. The purpose was to avoid attracting too much trouble, although with their current strength, they were able to sweep away those troubles and obstacles with hard power in many situations. As members of human society, they themselves had too many ties: family, friendship, morality, responsibility, self-restraint, etc., were all invisible chains that tied them down. The more righteous and moral a person was, the easier it was to be bound by these things. The ancients said that a gentleman can be deceived with principles, which is what this means. And now, Nazi was being held back. This was still the result of the little girl being shot while lying down, without having done or exposed anything herself. Since there was this demand for extra backdoor entries, why didn't those people in Japan talk to Liang Yue directly? Nonsense. Based on some of his past behavior and the fact that Japan had spent a lot of money but only got one spot for the 3 interstellar travels, someone didn't like Japan at all. To rashly talk to Liang Yue about these things would most likely lead to a breakdown, however. Whether it was the exploration and development of Xianlin Star or the learning plan of the mystical side system represented by the Extraordinary Academy, it was an irresistible temptation for them. Moreover, on the surface, these things that Liang Yue had created were completely fair and just to all countries in the world. In other words, all countries could participate. Although most countries could only get a small number of spots, it could be described as a distribution of benefits in this situation. Knowing that they were not welcome, if they broke down the negotiations, the consequences would be serious if others added and they didn't, and Liang Yue didn't want to care about anything about this. However, he also knew that as China and some small countries on Earth sent out their student candidates and the list of explorers to Xianlin Star was constantly being improved, the time left for the MU and other self-righteous forces was running out as the start date of the various plans for Xianlin Star approached. These people's small actions would inevitably become more frequent. Therefore, Liang Yue planned to simply turn a blind eye and leave Marvel for a while. I don't know if the alien group on the other side of the space gate has obtained a map of Earth and clarified the distribution of powerful forces in this world. The final landing point of these 4 monsters was actually chosen in Tokyo Bay. They just broke out of the slightly turbid sea surface in broad daylight and drilled out fiercely. Then, they swaggered side by side and rampaged towards the inland prosperous area. Although China had learned the news from the very beginning when these monsters appeared, it did not publicize it. A group of elite soldiers and officers and leaders who received the news came and sat leisurely next to the panoramic sandbox to watch the show. They smoked cigarettes and ate melons and snacks similarly. Although it was not clear whether the American side had researched a display instrument that could locate these cross-border monsters, the American side did not react this time. Even the military bases set up in various parts of Japan after the monsters landed did not make timely support gestures. From this, it can be seen that the joys and sorrows of human beings are sometimes indeed not synchronized, and as a country whose development was restricted after the war, Japan's own military combat capability is actually not strong, at least from the superficial public information. Probably, in order to verify this point, China and the United States tacitly did not speak out and did not intend to go to support. So they sat and watched the development of the situation. Fortunately, Nazi is still in Japan. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.